Well, welcome everyone to our study session on September 11th. Beautiful morning in Mesa, Arizona. We have Councilmember Duff and Councilmember Adams absent for the meeting, and they are excused. All other council members are there. Before we start, I'd like to say a few words about, as we pause to remember the events of September 11th. Thank you for last week we had a moment of silence, but 24 years ago, those images are still with us today. The bravery of the first responders, the resilience of our everyday Americans, and the lives that were lost is a reminder of both our nations and our enduring strength that we stand together. In light of the current events, yesterday's assassination of Charlie Kirk and the political violence that's out there is so unnecessary. It is also a reminder that we must remain committed to unity, respect, and finding common ground, even in times of division. Violence has no place in our democracy, and we honor both the memory of 9/11 and those we have recently lost, especially Charlie Kirk and what his family is going to go through. With that, with the somber meeting, we're going to start today's council meeting. Item 1 is to review, I hate even doing that after that statement, but item 1 is to review the agenda for next Monday's council meeting. Council? I made some notes. 5D is an irrigation water delivery district, and IWDD. Those are so necessary for these older subdivisions that allow them to do improvements in their irrigation districts as they age. I believe we have 7A, Park North multifamily. I'm sure that might come off the consent agenda.
Let's take 7A and 7B off consent. I know there's going to be a lot of folks showing up on that meeting.
Anything changed?
No, nothing's changed.
Nothing has changed at all.
No.
So what was the decision to put it back on if nothing has changed? Just because they want to move forward?
Yeah, it was.
Well, we did
that.
we did a continuance.
I know we did a continuance, but the goal was to maybe have some coordination with the neighborhood.
Mary can clarify, but this was at the request of the landowner or the developer.
That's correct, Scott. So Mayor, council members, it was introduced and it was continued, and they have asked for it to be put back on the agenda for council to take a final action on it. We did have several conversations with them about the different issues that council had brought up, but at this point, the plan has not changed and the development agreement has not changed. There might have been some tweaks, but nothing really substantial has changed in the DA.
And I'll make comments again. I'm just going to make them shorter. Because they're the same comments as last time. So thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Ms. Spilsbury, answer your question. Okay. I know there's a question on 8A about multifamily, but Mary disclosed it is a platted now for sale project. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And looking forward to 9C, the Price Manor 2, there was discussion on that the last introduction, so I'm sure that will come off consent as well. So, all right.
Mayor, I will highlight, of course, this is early, like we said, so if council has any questions of staff, don't hesitate to let us know during this interim until we're, yeah, exactly. The other point, though, just to point out on items 10A and 11A, this was certainly a response to council's desire to try to get input earlier in the process, and you'll see this later as we work through our budget process as well, just giving opportunities for input from our residents and others to provide earlier as we start the process. So as we kick off our couple of month discussion on utility rates and other fees, then we'll be able to have some input from the public earlier in the process.
Good, very good. That'd be welcome news for most. Okay, we went through the agenda for September 22nd. Moving forward, 2A is a presentation to discuss and provide direction on the recommended water and wastewater capacity fees. So Chris and Jesse.
Deja vu.
So this is kind of going to be a new concept, capacity fees, is that correct? All right. Be great to hear about this.
Okay, good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. So we're doing things a little bit differently this year than the normal rate season, which we come back here every fall. And after this presentation, we are going to then transition into the rates discussion. But we first wanted to talk to you about something we've been signaling to Council for probably a year or more, and that has to do with a capacity fee, which is putting into place a system where growth can pay for growth. We don't have anything like that now, and that's part of what's driving us here today to discuss this with you.
Chris or Scott, was there something prior to that? I think of the word impact fees, so is this kind of a different
Right, correct, Mayor.
avenue?
There were impact fees, and those phased out in 2023. The wastewater impact fee phased out, and in late 2024, the water impact fee phased out. So at present, we're a city that has no fee. And when I talk about a fee like this, it's a one-time connection fee for new development, and or also redevelopment where a meter's being upsized to require additional capacity on the system.
Okay.
So we'll get into defining what it is exactly, how we calculate it, what it's going to pay for. The first thing I want to talk about, there's really two whys, if you will, in terms of why we need this. And the one has to do with something I just mentioned, which is we don't have a mechanism in place right now. So any growth that we do is strictly on the backs of the existing ratepayers. And that's a compounding effect. So the capacity fee is a one-time fee where new growth comes in, they pay for that incremental share of growth that their development is imposing on the system. Whereas if it's on the existing ratepayers and there's higher rates initially, that compounds year after year after year. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other question we're answering is timing. So in the Audit and Finance Committee, we talked about a project that's under construction right now. It's the Gilbert McKellips Relief Sewer. So that sewer, it's a $15 million project. It's a growth project needed to accommodate additional wastewater generated in the North Central Mesa area, in particular the Lehigh area. And that was on our radar. It was in the master plan. In fact, we had already designed the project, but we were looking at doing that probably 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years down the road. Well, the development, which is very unpredictable, and that's another factor in this whole picture, development is very lumpy and unpredictable. Well, development really picked up in that area, wastewater generation increased, and we started to surcharge the sewer, meaning we filled the pipe, not only filled the pipe, but backed up flow into the manhole. That caused odor issues, and that triggered us to put in sensors so in real time we could see just what the flow was doing. And that's how we found that through parts of the day, the flow is surcharging into those manholes. So we couldn't wait any longer. So we got to a point, just to give you an idea of the implications, Maricopa County will not grant permits for new developments to actually finish construction and put their new development into service if there's no water capacity or wastewater capacity. So in this case, it would be a wastewater capacity issue. So Maricopa County looks to us to certify that there is capacity. So if we have a situation we know there's no capacity, we can't say there is, that would be fraud. So we were able to work out something with the county for this particular situation where we were able to verify that, yes, this project, we are pulling it forward to start construction. And so we're going to be running in parallel with developments that are building. So we were able to work out a conditional acceptance, if you will, for projects that are moving right now. So That's a situation we don't want to find ourselves in, but when growth projects become necessary a lot sooner than we had planned, we really have to do that. So that's a long way of saying, here's the implications. We had other critical projects ready to kick off, critical pipe inspections, equipping well sites that we had drilled. We had to put some of that on hold, $15 million worth, whatever that equivalent amount was, and defer that out. With projects we've already deferred $180 million of rehab and life cycle projects. So that's another reason we wanted to create a capacity fee so that new growth, as it comes in, can pay for their incremental share. So as it stands right now, our existing customer base has demands, water demands, and generates wastewater that would not require any more expansion of our infrastructure. If we had no more growth today, we would not have any more expansion of our infrastructure. But that's not the case. So we're going to go through in detail and just show you how we built this. And let's start with what it is. And a lot of this I talked about already, so we'll go through it pretty quick. So it's a one-time charge for new growth. Jesse's going to get into how it's calculated and what type of projects. We have actually about $400 million worth of projects that we need to fund that are strictly growth over the next 10-year period. And I should point out that this came out of the integrated master plan that we just finished. It was probably the most comprehensive master plan our department has ever done. And it takes a very hard look at not only reconstruction or rehab, but also relevant to today's discussion, growth. So let's go to the next one, Jesse.
So Chris, just backing up, you say $400 million over 10 years, and that's just water-related growth?
It's merits both water and wastewater infrastructure.
Water and wastewater
strictly
infrastructure.
for growth. And we have a list at the end, but
Okay.
half of that is the expansion of the Signal Butte plant. So that is to meet the growth demands in East and Southeast Mesa.
Gotcha, thanks.
So the capacity fee, it's a one-time charge. It's for a new connection, and it's complies with ARS 9-51101. So ARS 511-1 gives a city as a water provider the ability to impose fees, water and wastewater fees. It's generic in that sense, but the capacity fee in itself is more of a national standard. It's a national practice. It's practiced all over the country. It stems from AWWA Manual M1, which is it's a very thick book that gets into rates, fees, the methodologies behind it. But capacity fee is it's a fee that is really with the intent of having growth pay for itself. This map, this comes right out of the integrated master plan that I just mentioned. It shows our whole service area. And one thing I want to point out is that the city is about 85% built out already. So this $400 million is really just to build infrastructure for that vacant 15%. So all of these different colored shapes are different land uses. That's what the different colors are, but they're either vacant or underdeveloped parcels. So these are the parcels in question. And I should also point out that 90% of the remaining development, if you look at all those shapes and those colors, is commercial and industrial. So big data centers, manufacturing, really the whole spectrum of commercial. And that only about 10% of that growth is residential.
Ms. Goforth.
Back on the previous slide, Chris, it said that the fee is designed to cover the portion of cost for construction. What about for ongoing operation? Is there a way to calculate in for that as well, a little bit? Or does that just go
Sure, Mayor.
in increased rates?
Mayor, council member, go for it. So that, if we want to really strictly comply with the practice of M1 as a capacity fee, and we had, I should mention this too, we had Black & Veatch, our consultant on the master plan. They have a lot of experience and skill at doing these kind of fees. They worked with us, and we wanted to make sure that we complied with every step of the requirement. So it doesn't bake in operations costs. It's really just a capital. It's really a capital charge.
Okay.
Oh, and I guess to finish my answer to your question, once something is built, then it's considered O&M until you get 20 or 30 years down the road, and then we're actually rehabbing that asset. But initially, there's not much O&M with a new asset. So our Signal Butte plant that we just built has relatively low maintenance compared to the Val Vista water treatment plant, which is one of the oldest water treatment plants in the state. That has a lot more ongoing life cycle work needed.
I guess, so it'd be different if we were building a new plant, but we're just, right, that would be a lot of new operating personnel and different expenses. But you're saying to cover the existing growth, it's not going to change much of, you're saying the O&M initially for the first couple decades?
Correct. I think that's fair to say. That's been our experience. When you build a new pipeline, we're not even expecting it's going to do an inspection on it for several years. When you build a new plant, it's just general maintenance. It's the chemicals, it's the electricity. There's not a lot of life cycle rehab to do for the first several years at least.
What about new personnel? Do we have to,
When we do an expansion, for instance, Signal Butte that we're expanding right now, we build into the CIP initially the staff that we need to bring on to help facilitate that new expansion, and then they become absorbed. They become part of the O&M budget down the line. So they do add to the O&M budget down the line. Okay, so I don't think I have anything else to add on the map. If we can go to the next slide. All right, Jesse.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Mayor, Council. So I'm here to talk about how the fee is calculated, and you'll have to bear with me. There's a lot of tables and there's some math involved. So as Chris mentioned, we use the American Water Works Association manual for principles of water rates, fees, and charges. And that was basically the guiding methodology on how we calculated the fee. And as Chris also mentioned, we use the incremental cost method. And so that method, the way that method works is you're only looking forward. So we assume that our existing customers and our existing capacity can meet the demands of our existing customers, and that our existing customers have paid for that existing capacity to be constructed. So we're only going to look at the new customers we plan on adding and the cost to build or expand the existing capacity. So it's only looking forward. And as Chris mentioned also, we just completed our integrated master plan in April of 2025. So that master plan identified the $400 million worth of costs and what those projects are in order to be able to accommodate that remaining vacant parcels. So here, this is just right out of the M1 manual. And I just show this to kind of orient everyone so we can talk about what the city puts in and what the developer puts in. So on your right bottom, you see a house. So the developer is responsible for putting in the meter up to the house, which the manual calls customer facilities. Per city code, the developer is also responsible for what we'll call the connection facilities. So that's the water line and the sewer line that are in front of the property. They have to put in the half street and then the water and sewer in front of the property. The city is responsible for what we're going to call the system facilities. Those are the transmission mains, the large diameter regional pipelines, the treatment plant, the pump stations, the storage tanks, and the connection to the water supply. So now we're going to get into a little bit of math. So we're going to take the capacity cost. So that's the cost that we need to pay to expand. Then we're going to divide it by how many gallons per day that capacity adds. So we're going to come up with a cost per gallon per day. And then we take that unit cost per gallon and we're going to multiply it by a service unit. And we'll define a service unit in the next slide. But a service unit is kind of your lowest common denominator. In our case, that's a 3/4 inch meter. So we're going to figure out how many gallons per day a 3/4 inch meter customer uses. So we'll take the unit cost per gallon per day and multiply it by gallon per day, and then we end up with a cost for 3/4 inch meters. So here's a list, a summarized list of the projects that we expect or identified in our integrated master plan over the next 10 years. And as Chris already mentioned, the $200 million is the expansion of the water treatment plant at Signal Butte. There's pipelines, pump stations, groundwater wells, and then there's much less on the wastewater side. It's just lift stations and pipelines. So adding all those up, that's the 400 million. Okay, so now we have to derive the service unit. So the way we derive the service unit, and this is just right out of the manual, we take the number of customers that we had last year, 128,000 3/4-inch metered customers. We look at how many gallons those customers used over the 12-month period. In this case, it's 12 billion gallons. And to put that in perspective, the city as a whole last year used about 32 billion gallons. So the 3/4-inch customers use about 40% of the total. So we take the 12 billion gallons, we divide it by the number of customers, and then we get an average for the year. So the average 3/4-inch customer uses 93,000 gallons a year. We divide that by 365 days, and that's 257 gallons per day. Now, water treatment plants and pump stations and pipelines, they have to be sized for the maximum day of the year. So here in the valley, due to temperature and outdoor water demands, we see much higher usage in July, June and July, and much lower usage in January. Average day typically occurs around March, April. So 257 gallons per day is about what your average customer would use in April. So we have to then escalate that up with the peaking factor. So our customers use about 50% more water in July than they do in April. So, and again, that's out of our master plan. So we take the 257 gallons per day, multiply it by 1.5, and we get what the demand is for a 3/4-inch meter, which is 385 gallons per day.
Now, Jesse, those are typically residential customers, the 3/4-inch?
Typically, yes, but there are quite a lot of
Some.
smaller commercial buildings that have 3/4-inch meters, so they can be commercial.
So this is a general average. I'm just thinking
Yes.
if I were a customer that has a 1-inch or 1.25 1.5 line, how does that apply to this scenario?
We'll definitely get
You'll
to
get
that.
there,
Yes,
okay.
definitely.
Sorry to get ahead of you.
Yeah, so just think of it like we have to first define the lowest common denominator, and then we'll scale it up for the larger meters.
Okay.
Okay, so for wastewater, we don't actually have a meter. So we meter the water into the building, we don't meter it out. So we have to do a little bit of inference to try to figure out how much wastewater that customer is generating. So what we do there is we take our same population of meters, 128,000 meters, and for wastewater, the way that we do the wastewater, and this again is out of the manual, we take the winter average. So that's typically December, January, and February. And the reason why is outdoor water usage is almost nothing in the winter. But just to be safe, we multiply it by 90%. So we take the 3 lowest winter months, we average them, multiply it by 90%. So that gives us 720 million gallons a month. We take that 720 million divided by 128,000 customers, and we get 5,593 gallons per month. We divide that by 30 days. So our average wastewater customer is returning 186 gallons per day. So the average water in is 285, we're getting 186 back. And then for wastewater, we have to escalate it for the maximum day. The wastewater system has a much lower peaking factor than the water system because your indoor water usage doesn't vary a whole lot. Just a interesting fact, the maximum wastewater day that we see in Mesa happens to be in March, and we believe that's due to spring training. That's when the most people are in the city of Mesa using water inside. So we take that times 1.1, we get 205 gallons per day.
We're almost done, we promise.
There's a lot of coffee out there.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Yes. So we take the capacity cost and then we divide it by the capacity that's being added in the next 10 years. And then we get that unit cost. So 320 million divided by 16 million gallons per day, we get $20 per gallon per day, multiply it by the service unit, and that's how we come up with the equivalent fee. We do a similar thing on the wastewater side, and that's how we come up with the 2 fees for a 3/4 inch. So now to answer the mayor's question, what do we do for the larger meters? So now we have identified, we've defined what it is for the lowest common denominator. We're now gonna multiply it up. So So based on the flow that a meter will put out, that's how we use it to scale up. So a 3/4 inch meter can flow 30 gallons per minute. A 1 inch meter can flow 50 gallons per minute. So a 1 inch meter uses 1.67 times a 3/4 inch meter. So we basically then just take the fee and multiply it by 1.67, and that's how we get the fee for a 1 inch meter. And then we just do that all the way down to 10 inch. So you could have one 10 inch meter or 183 3/4 inch meters, and you would use the same amount of flow. So that's how we size it for the various size customers.
And then if we want to look at where we stand today, so you can see the bottom line. So today, as I talked about, we don't have any mechanism in place to impose upon new growth, everything, whether it's reconstruction, life cycle growth. Right now, those costs are borne by all the existing rate-paying base. If we were to initiate these fees, looking at the water and wastewater, we'd be about $9,500 for the 3/4 inch meter, and then going up in size with the larger meters. But you can see for the 3/4 inch meter how we stack up against other cities around us and in the state. We're somewhat in the middle, probably a little bit lower. You can see Phoenix, they had just increased theirs. They're close to $30,000. So we would be quite a bit less than that. Tempe is the lowest, they're $4,400, but they're essentially built out. We are not built out. As I mentioned, we have $400 million at least that we identified today. And that's another good point. With this capacity fee, if we establish initial values like you're seeing in front of you, we intend on about the same interval as we update our master plan, about every 4 or 5 years. We would then, as part of that, do another 10-year look ahead, and just to make sure that we're on target. And if we need to adjust, we could do that. Okay. And then the conclusions are really things we've already talked about. This would create a separate revenue source, a one-time revenue source, so that that new growth would pay the incremental costs of building in those new larger pipes and expanding plants and doing the things that are only required and only driven by that new growth. It protects the new customers in a number of ways. One would be the variability and the unpredictability of new growth as it comes in, because, like I said, that could be disruptive to the CIP, and that would cause us to defer projects like this relief sewer that I talked about earlier in the presentation. And then we also intend on creating a separate bucket, if you will, a separate fund for revenue collected through the capacity fee, and then that revenue source or stream would pay for new projects as we tackle those. So with that, I think that was the end of our presentation, and we could take any questions you have. I should add that, so as we transition into the rates presentation after this, we are going to show you, like we always do, what our proposed rate increases are, but then side by side in that presentation, we'll show you the difference between if we did not have a capacity fee and if we did initiate this capacity fee, what those difference in rate increases would be for the different customer classes.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I think sometimes, it can be a bit arduous to show how the sausage gets made, but I think it's important in this case, one, because this is a new fee, but yet again, it just shows the work and the background that goes into establishing this under the parameters of state statute. And like they mentioned, we brought in a national consultant who works and understands fee structures like this to advise us and help us navigate through this. So this wasn't an arbitrary number that we came up with. But to the point of growth paying for growth, which I think is a philosophy that we all share, because if not, that means that every dime spent is going to our existing ratepayers to subsidize that new growth. And I don't think that's a philosophy that this council adheres to. And so this is a mechanism for us to, that's allowed under state statute, to go out and capture growth and putting that back into the infrastructure that it is causing for the needs of expansions and upfitting and everything like that the gentleman discussed. So I think, we just have to keep it too at this philosophy of it's important, we believe, to get this fee in place, because if not, as you saw from the chart that they had, that's nearly $10,000 each time that's being borne by the ratepayers. Because right now, as of today, we have no water or wastewater fee. Those have sunset. So every time a new meter comes online, it's being borne by the ratepayers until we can get this fee in place to allow growth to pay for growth. That's the simple philosophy that we wanted to bring forward under state statute, and using the tools in the toolbox that have been given to us in order to ensure that philosophy of growth paying for growth.
Good. Mr. Redio?
Two questions. Do you have a table that highlights how many, I know the majority of users, though it's around 40% of who we have that use water are quarter inch, but do you have a table that shows how many customers we have from 1 to 10 inch meters? And then my second question is, I'm not sure if I'm doing the math right, but it seems like across, I did just a division on like the total cost to the max flow, and it seems like it's the same for everybody. Why wouldn't we tier, or maybe I'm doing it wrong, but why wouldn't we tier the larger meter sizes more on them as far as cost on a capacity fee than the quarter inch customers?
Okay, sure, Mayor, Councilmember Heredia. So you asked a lot there, so let me unpack it. So.
It was simple
Yeah.
for me, right? But I know it's probably it's more complex than that.
I would say, so instead of a tier, you already see, if we can go to the chart that shows the different meter sizes, that one there.
Chart 12.
It's already exponential, because if you look at a 3/4 inch meter and you look at a 1.5 is double the diameter, but it's not double the multiplier. It's 3 1/3 times as much flow. So it's already, by the time you get up to a 4 and an 8 and a 10, it's an exponential curve to how much water. So we're really looking at what is the capacity of that meter to flow water, how much water can go through that. And because it's already exponential, I think it's already achieving, I think, what you're asking.
So I'm misunderstanding the multiplier then. If, when you look at the max flow and the total cost, everybody has a cost, or it comes out through 317 for each one. So I don't know if I'm misunderstanding as far as how much they pay, as far as, seems like all throughout from the 3/4 to 10, the scale is the same as far as the pay for the capacity fee.
I think Jesse wants
Why
to.
wouldn't we scale it more? I'm assuming like it would cost more to, as far as infrastructure for us on a 10 inch and 8 inch, for them to pay more, because it just costs more for us to build that. And it seems like the growth that we're gonna have in the next 10 years, 90% you said, I think, is these large users that probably not at the quarter inch or the 75, but it will be these, larger diameter meter sizes, right? So.
Yeah, so Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, so if you look at the other thing here, what we're trying to do is get everybody to pay the same cost per gallon, right? So a 3/4 inch meter a 3/4 inch meter can use so many gallons, and a 10 inch meter can use so many gallons. Everybody's paying the same cost per gallon. So you are correct that it does scale up that way. So a larger building will, by necessity, have to put a larger meter in, and they all pay the same cost per gallon. So that's how we make the rate fair, that everyone's paying the same cost per gallon. It's just larger buildings, more commercial properties tend to use more water, so they'll pay more based on the meter side.
Wouldn't it cost us more to build those than the 3/4 inch? Or is it, maybe statute-wise, like we have to make it fair? I know Jim popped up here, so maybe I'm playing into the statute of what it has to be fair, but I'm just seeing, it will cost a lot more for us to build these larger meter sizes, right? Why wouldn't they pay more of a share of those costs than the quarter inch, right?
Well, I think for the council member, I think that your transmission or delivery pipelines are a certain size diameter, and you attach your meter to those pipelines, so that pipeline's still the same diameter. And so they're just
Yeah.
increasing or decreasing the size of the meter off the same transmission line or delivery line.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important to understand is, so we wanted to comply to the letter of the law with the M1 practice, the standard. And that standard is, the first thing you do is you get the total cost, which is 400 million. You look at how much capacity that cost is adding for you in the system, water, and then we did the same with wastewater. And then following that practice, you distill that down to the least common unit, which is the 3/4 inch. And then once you get a flow for that unit, then you're just extrapolating all across the other meter sizes to get to the total. At the end of the day, we're going to collect the 400 million. It's just we have to comply with the standard for that distribution of who pays what. But the 10-inch meter is significantly, I think it was almost $1.5 million for a 10-inch meter. And then, so the other part of your earlier question was a chart with how many of these meters. So a 10-inch meter, you can count on one hand in the system. An 8-inch meter, maybe you count on two hands. Then 6 and 4 starts to get, there's more of that. But I think what we want to assure you of is that we complied with the practice in that manual. And that's why we enlisted the help of that national firm, Black & Veatch, to make sure. We had a lot of coordination with them. They had some good input. And then they wrote a letter of endorsement or certification that went with their review of our study, of our report, which is there for your viewing. We do have a table when we get into the rates presentation. We have a backup slide that does have a good breakdown, because you had asked a question, Councilmember Heredia, at the Audit and Finance Committee session. We have a nice table that gets to the heart of your question in terms of how many customers are in the tier 1 and the tier 2 and so forth. And I think that'll shed some more light on the customer classes too.
Ms. Spilsbury.
Well, I think this had to do with did you want to go?
Well, I was just going to say, I think you and I are thinking the same as far as ongoing, maybe stress on the system. So a bigger customer, is paying that unit cost and more of it because there's more units, right? Initially in the build out, but ongoing, it's also more stress on the system, right? And will require sooner maintenance because there's more flow. So I don't know if that is that's what I was kind of getting at as to the ongoing increased burden on the system from a larger customer.
I would say,
we don't have a way to
right.
do that. And I don't know if that,
Yeah,
Frankie, is that kind of what
I think
you were?
that's part of it. I think my piece is like we're trying to tier these costs in other aspects as well. Why wouldn't we tier these costs to be more equitable? It seems like I know they're paying over $1.7 million right here in this table, but it's the same scale costs. They're gonna make millions, hopefully, building these large warehouses, right? But it's the same scale cost to a 1/4 inch meter.
Well, another way to
Right.
think about it too is, so if you're looking at ongoing, so you pay the one-time connection fee, is that the service, so the base rate, and we'll get into that, or we can get into that with the rates, the base fee is extremely more expensive for those larger meters as well.
But not the unit, I don't think. I have a question on that, the next presentation. I mean, the unit fee is not more from my fuzzy math.
So-
I mean, I'm not,
Mayor and council, if I can, and it's always dangerous when an attorney tries to talk about math, but if you go to the chart that says that you have the peaking rate, and so no, the multiplier that you peak by like 1.5 for water.
Oh.
So if you see that last line, the average daily demand and max demand peaking factor 1.5, see, they're assuming an oversize for that peak day. And so on the rate side, that's why you have tiered rates, is in order to handle the fact that there's a peaking, the rates have sort of a peaking effect. So it's built in already. So now to also do it again a second time to tier it, it's already tiered on the capital side. So you see, that's what that's capturing, is that peaking oversize that you need for that summer month. And so it's built into every single one already. And so that's why you can't tier it again. And so that's, I think, the answer to yours, Councilmember Heredia. And then Councilmember Goforth, the fee, both by industry and by standard, is that this is a capital improvement fee, and that's what we can capture. It's not for O&M, and so we can't sort of pull that in. That would get us back into probably some sort of legal challenge to try to pull in sort of ongoing future, decades from now, replacement cost. That's part of the rate. The rate payer, that large industrial user that's using a lot of water, that will have to embed that in our rate. And we need to, and you'll see here in the next presentation, we're going to increase our rates on large industrial users.
For sure, and I'll ask this then, but I don't think we're increasing, I think to Frankie's point, the fee per gallon is actually lower in some cases for commercial than it is for residential.
You're correct.
I think that's what you're.
And we're going to get into that, and then we're going to show you, and that's historically been the case. Mesa used to be predominantly a residential community, and there was the thought that, we want to encourage commercial development. So those rates were lower historically, and especially over the last few years, we have started a trajectory to where we try to create parity or equity between the residential customer class and the non-residential. And in our prior presentation to Audit and Finance, we showed a plan to get to parity between those classes in fiscal year, I think it was 27, 28. And then there was some good feedback from the committee to see if we could accelerate that. So we've modeled that, and we are going to present that today to try to get to parity sooner, more like a year and a half from now rather than three years.
And I'll have some comments on the definition of parity in this situation.
Sure.
So.
Ms. Pillsbury.
I know, I'm trying to wrap my brain around all of this. I guess my main question, I have two, but why, when the capacity rates sunsetted, did we not do anything about it? Why did we wait 3 years to do something?
Well,
That person's gone.
Well,
Well, no, that's what I'm wondering, is that, I don't know.
I think we, Mayor.
knew we were growing.
Mayor, Councilmember Pillsbury, I think we saw it was either water or wastewater that didn't sunset until late '24. Is that
Right.
correct? So
correct.
it was water, it was
Okay.
wastewater the year before. And so you're right, there's a gap, but what we're trying to do is make sure that gap doesn't exist for too long. So, Monday morning quarterback, could we have moved faster on this? Likely, but now I think that.
I was trying to figure
but
out
it's-
if I was missing something in philosophy or in past councils, or, what I don't know. I just was trying to figure out what I might be missing in that conversation, because we're really good in this city about planning ahead and preparing for stuff like this. So I guess I'm just confused of how we even let there be a gap.
Yeah, and I think, and Chris mentioned this too, I think what we see through this mechanism too is a way that we can stay on top of this as we move forward. As our master plans adjust and other things like that, we'll be able to be more nimble in the way that we're able to make sure that these costs are captured in the future.
and part of the timing has to do with, it's very data intensive. We wanted to make sure we had good, accurate data that we could hang our hat on. And that data emerged from the integrated master plan, and that was just finished in the spring. So it was even going back to last year's budget cycle when we started to first talk about our intent to explore and move towards a capacity fee. So it just took time to work through to finish the master plan, first of all, and then to get everything together, write the report, get assistance from the consultant, and then get to where we are today. So it just took a little time to do that.
Okay, and so I'm assuming this is the same as all the other presentations today, that they would be voted on and not till December and going into effect is this different than all the other rates we're talking about today?
It would be
Effective January 1st.
Right, it would be introduced on the 22nd of this month, The introduction of the capacity fee ordinance itself would be November 17th.
Okay.
The vote would happen on December 1st.
So, but then these would go into effect January 1st.
Correct.
Okay. My other question, and maybe you said this and I lost it somewhere, but on page 13 with all the different cities, we're quite low. And I'm wondering why everyone else is so much higher.
I can't speak for the other cities. I don't know what's driving. Really, you have to look at what are your projects, and really, at face value, that's as simple as it is.
And I would say, I mean, just speculation on this. I mean, if you look at some of these, I know the Phoenix Northwest corridor is identified. I mean, if you're familiar, I'm assuming that's up around the TSMC area. I mean, infrastructure is definitely lacking in that area. And
Pretty
I'm
much
sure
non-existent.
Exactly. And so I'm sure that required a tremendous lift by the city of Phoenix in order to provide the infrastructure in that area.
Like Flagstaff kind of jumped out at me, right? Because like is there some massive growth that's happening there that I'm not aware of? It's just such a smaller city, so I'm just.
Well, you're spreading out, they probably have less infrastructure growth needs than we do, but you're spreading it out over a smaller amount of vacant parcels.
But all the other cities are going off of the same formulas we are to come up with their costs.
It's somewhat different. I think this blends, because we wanted to give a perspective of what a potential customer would be paying for this. I think some of this blends what impact fees that they're paying in those respective cities if they don't have a capacity fee. So we just wanted to try to give you some magnitude of scale. There are differences in that, though, the calculations, and like we said, we can't speak to
Right.
their infrastructure needs, but it was just to give you a little bit of scale in understanding, where we are relative to if you were going and building a home in one of those other communities, what you would be paying in an impact fee for that.
And it depends how far you're built out. So at 85% built out here in Mesa, we're falling in where I'd expect us to fall. Phoenix, especially Northwest Phoenix, in that TMC area, there's a tremendous amount of growth that needs to happen. So there's a lot more they have ahead of them. And that explains also why Tempe, which is essentially built out, is the lowest.
So because it feels like there's a lot of things being built and stuff, but our infrastructure is in place, maybe more so than the other cities.
In parts of the city, but from that map we showed, there's parts of the city where half of the 400 million is just expanding this large plant. It's already large, 24 MGD to 48. And then if you get into the Pecos corridor, so you get way southeast Mesa, we have, Jesse, do you remember the total cost of that interceptor sewer? I think that's a $40 million project in itself. So we're building these trunk lines, some transmission mains, a lot of interceptor sewers, and then these are the big ticket items that are driving that cost.
Okay.
And then in the report itself, we have we have an individual list of projects by name, and then we have a cash flow over the 10-year period. We cash flow those out.
Okay, sorry, one more question. I shouldn't say sorry. Is this something that we'll be looking at every year to change, or you said this stays the same way for?
Mayor, Council Member Spilsbury, we'll approach this at the same interval we do master planning, because that's when we're going to get the best data. And that cycle is about every 4 or 5 years.
4 to 5 years. Okay, so this is not something we will change every year.
We would not.
Okay.
So we're establishing an ordinance on
Yeah.
this to move forward if council passes that.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Does this include like drilling, groundwater wells, drilling additional wells? Things like that?
Sure. Mayor, Councilmember, go forth. It includes a lot of well equipping. We have about 6 wells we've drilled already that have not been equipped. We've drilled them, we've capped them off, and a lot of it has to do with just rising costs. So a lot of that's been deferred because the existing rates that we have in place can't afford to cover all that. So we've had to defer quite a bit of well work. This would allow us, frankly, to be able to have less or have more predictability, because there won't be these growth projects that move forward to absorb those capital funds. It'll be a separate bucket, and then we could have a more predictable path for things like equipping wells.
Thank you.
I have one follow-up question. If this is approved and we get the capacity fees, what are we intending to do with those monies?
Mayor Freeman, so the money goes into a separate fund And Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the intent was to have this bucket or this source of funds not subject to the general fund transfer. Is that correct?
So it won't be part of the, the calculation for utility rates gross revenue for purposes of the transfer. So none of this, it will not increase the transfer. It'll be kept separate and it'll be used for those capital projects.
So basically, we're reinvesting in our infrastructure.
Correct.
Okay. That was one of my questions.
So does that mean that we would be using cash to pay for future projects related to these developments, or would we still be using bonds and repaying those bonds?
That was my next.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah, Mayor and Vice Mayor, it would definitely be a combination of both. I mean, this would be part of our revenue source that we would be able to use to pay back those bonds, but it would be a mixture. And Brian,
We brought the financial guy.
yeah,
up, too.
exactly.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Brian Ritchell, Office of Management and Budget Director. Yes, Mayor, it would be a combination. At first, we wouldn't have the cash because we're doing the projects now. So once those meters get set and we collect that fee, we would start putting it into that separate fund. And as it grew, we would pay either cash for those projects, or when we issue debt, that specific revenue would pay for those specific debt services for that project.
Well, that helps in offsetting some of the burden of our residential and commercial industrial customers, especially on our bond repayments as well. And I like using the cash concept to help offset, future bonds and costs to our residents, and just in doing business in general. Have you analyzed how much money would be generated, I think, through this, Brian? I mean, if in the first year, or are we using the first year, or I know it's based on growth potential, I'm sure.
I can answer that, Mayor Freeman. So using the master plan again, we have a pretty good curve on just the pace at which development would come in through the customer classes, and that analysis yielded about $1.5 million per month, about $18 million a year, based on the trend of development.
Okay, and that's just the trend, 18
Right.
million per year. That's pretty significant.
It is.
Ms. Spilsbury, I know you have a thought.
Oh, you can see that on my face. We need 400 million though? Is that what you said?
Correct.
Because 18 million a year would take a long time. What am I missing?
Over 10 years.
Yeah, it'll take quite a while.
Oh, over 10 years is when we need the 400 million?
Right.
No, 10 years is just in that window, that's when we would develop those projects.
Yeah.
If we hit a recession or we hit something that slowed down development, we would collect that slower. It could stretch out over any number of years. It could be 12, it could be 16, could be all the way to build out. Well, it would be all the way to build out, I think is the best way to answer that. And that's why we'll continue to look at this
Okay.
on an
400
interval.
to build out.
Right. Well, it's
Yeah.
400 based on our best view now in the master plan for the next 10 years, but we don't anticipate much beyond those 10 years.
Okay.
Because we're not going to expand the Signal View plant again, and that was half of it. We're going to be done with those wells. There'll be new wells. So when we update this again in 5 years, those wells will now come into play. So the fee will adjust. It could go down, it could stay the same.
But
I don't know.
18 million would get us through as we're headed that way. And I get what you're saying. So then the master plan, you'd look again to see where we're at and how much we need or whatever. But it would take a long time to get to the 400 million.
Correct.
So that's.
Is it going to get to the 400 million?
Well, it would have to based on, because the vacant parcels, when you do the math, the vacant parcels as they develop, if they develop, it would cover the cost. Because we're starting with that cost and then
22.
doing the math backwards.
And I think that goes to your question, Mayor, about, if you think of it like a home mortgage, I mean, if we have to build and upsize this plan, a lot of times we have to do it on the front end because that's not something that can be done overnight. But then as growth develops this fee that we'll be putting back into the capital side, that's what we're going to use to make those payments. And so, yeah, we're building the infrastructure, but then this helps our payback. And as you said, Mayor, that will lessen the burden on the ratepayers then on that.
Vice Mayor.
So this is for water.
And wastewater.
And wastewater. What about gas? Is there something in statute that allows us to do gas? Because again, pipes, transfer of a commodity is,
Yeah. Mayor and council, so the capacity fee statute, or really it's the water wastewater fee statute, but I'll just call it the capacity fee statute, is unique to water and wastewater. So if we want to do something for one of the other utilities, we then have to shift back over to the impact fee statute and utilize that statute.
okay, and that's, the impact fee statute is, can we still use that?
So we can still use it. It's the difference between the statute is the impact fee statute. I guess the best way to shortly say it is very cumbersome statute. It is the most regulated fee by an exponential amount of any municipal fee. The process to create the fee and then even after the fee is very significant, including things like having a separate committee to create the impact fee analysis and the projects, and that committee is made up of citizens and also industry experts, and it's a very long process and tedious, and it's to such an extent a number of cities have actually, smaller municipalities have sort of gotten out of the business of having impact fees. And so this is more the capacity fee statute affords us another process. The methodology behind this to the actual fee is the same sort of methodology, though, that goes into an impact fee. So the actual numbers behind it and sort of, I'll call it the science behind it, is the same.
Vice Mayor, I think we asked that during audit, and I'm sure they'll talk about it during the gas, but the infrastructure for gas is a lot less significant and essentially is being paid as it's built already. I think hopefully they can discuss it during the gas presentation, but I think it's
true.
not the same sort of large capacity infrastructure burdens
doesn't
that
have-
service a large area.
It doesn't have quite the impact that water and wastewater does, but I think the council who weren't part of that committee and the public needed to hear that,
sure.
that answer, because it still has the potential to fall on ratepayers to pay for growth in that particular service, so.
And I think to your point, obviously, we can go back and look at impact fees. That's no problem to see. Water and wastewater would be exempted out then from that if we were to implement this fee. So we, of course, would not need to look at that, but the other fees that were associated with impact fees and see the cost benefit to the process that Mr. Smith just spoke to.
Very good. I think, Mr. Butler, you mentioned to me that there was some pending lawsuit litigation to a municipality that was finalized to allow us to move forward with this type of capacity fee that was just resolved recently. So that's why we were kind of behind the curve, but yet now we're in the groove.
So Mayor and Council, and it was about 2 years ago, the city of Flagstaff has a capacity fee, and they got sued, and ultimately they prevailed in that litigation, and we're implementing the same sort of process under the same statute that Flagstaff did.
Okay. It's just interesting to note that two of our neighboring municipalities, the south of us, just, you know, they have higher fees than we do. You know, not that, I'm just curious, is our fees fair to our community compared to other neighbors? Do we need higher, I don't like the elephant in the room, do we need higher fees? I think Ms. Spilsbury was alluding to that. I don't know. I'm just asking the question, do you think this is a reasonable expectation for our community? Which,
Again,
I
Mayor,
don't want higher fees. I'm just saying, you know, you look at, I'll use the word Chandler. I mean, they're pretty much built out, but they have a 40% higher fee than we do. You look at Gilbert, I don't know what the GWRP is at the riparian area, or almost 100% more than we do, so.
Well, I think one way to look at it also is some of these fees were established a little while back, and they used the same or similar approach where they looked at what is the growth ahead of them, what does that infrastructure look like. It's important when you go into this process, you have to be very agnostic about what the outcome is going to be. You really just want the numbers to speak for themselves if you want to stick, you know, to the true purpose of the manual of that practice, which is what we did We just wanted to be as accurate as possible. We didn't feel like we were being over-conservative or under-conservative to arrive at the project list, the 400 million. We feel that's very accurate, and if we do this again in 5 years, or when we do it again in 5 years, we don't think that would even change much. We think we have a good, because a lot of this has already been designed and it's started construction, it's not in service yet, but we think we have a good feel for it, and then just following the steps within the practice, the results were what we're showing for you today. So it's hard to speak to whether ours is too low or too high versus another city, because they have their own special circumstances.
Mayor, and I think that's part of the beauty of this is that we didn't back into a number. We didn't go out and say, well, we want to be here relative to the other communities. The numbers speak for themselves when they did their analysis. And so that's the assurances that we can add to have with industry and others who will be interested in this. And is that, we looked at our infrastructure needs, we did that assessment, and the rate and the fee is the fee based off of that. And, we can't speak to obviously the unique circumstances in all of those communities about whether they stayed ahead of growth or where they are in their infrastructure development. But we feel like our fee was done using all of the science behind it that Chris spoke to and the national standards, and we feel good about how we came to our number.
Okay, good, very good. All right, I think you're about wearing us down, but we have
Okay.
more to do.
More to do. I'm going to stay up here. Brian's going to come up, and we're going to get into rates.
Well, why don't we do that? 2B is a presentation on utility fund forecasts, staff recommended rates and fees, adjustments for consideration in the notice of intent. Chris and Brian.
Should have been at the Audit and Finance Committee.
Fun time.
You three were there, right?
We needed behavioral health there. Oh, my mic's on, look at that.
Water would be great.
All right, good morning, Mayor, Council, Brian Ritchell, Management and Budget Director. Beside me is also Chris Hassert. So this morning we will be talking about presenting the overview of the fiscal year 25-26 utility fund forecast and staff recommended rate adjustments. And so just to give you an overview of the presentation, I will be kicking it off and going through the kind of the forecast, and then each individual department will come up and speak specifically about the rate adjustments that they are recommending, and then I will come back and then kind of recap and in the conclusion and show another forecast. And as kind of mentioned before, we'll kick it off with a forecast of if council does not move forward with a rate capacity, and then the departments will, especially water and wastewater, will talk about if there is a capacity fee adopted, and then I'll come back and show a forecast comparing the two if there is no rate capacity and if there is a capacity fee. So just a reminder of the utility operations. Each utility is operated as a separate business center, but treated as one fund. We take a look at the whole fund as itself. So when we're looking at the net sources and uses, the reserve fund balance, the percentages, and also with the debt service itself, we take a look at it as one fund. The reserve balance of that fund provides a safe net for any unforeseen conditions that we have seen in the past of either with the electric or gas or any of the water. The reserve balance also used to smooth rate adjustments year to year, and I'll get into that a little bit more, and that's one of our 5 principles. Another thing that's not up here but I wanted to mention is that the reserve balance also is good for the credit rating agency and also for interest. With a good reserve fund balance, they take a look at that with our net sources and uses, and they determine what our credit rating is, and that helps with either lowering our interest rates or increasing our interest rates. So having a healthy fund balance reserve helps with our interest rates. So as I mentioned, the 5 principles that we follow, I know you've seen this before, but this really is a cornerstone of what we look at when we're looking at the forecast, but then also when we do the rate adjustments, and keep this in mind. So the first one is balanced net sources and uses, and we try to make sure we're balancing those to close to zero as possible. And then 20% or higher in the reserve fund balance, that is key. As I mentioned before, when we go to the credit rating agencies, things like that, they like to see a higher percentage and a higher reserve balance. But then also rate adjustments that are predictable, smooth throughout the forecast. And the city has had this philosophy for a long time of doing incremental rate increases year after year. And ever since I've been here, we've been doing it. And what that does is you may have seen in the paper, a couple of other municipalities starting to take a look at that philosophy. Because previously what they've done is they would do a rate increase, not increase it for a few years, but then they would have to do another significant rate increase to catch up to any inflation, operations and maintenance, stuff like that, and then not do a rate increase for a couple more years and then have to do a significant. But what they're finding out is what Mesa has been doing for a long time is if you do incremental rate increases year over year, that compounding effects helps with the fund inflation, fund operations and maintenance, but also what they're looking at too is it lessens the impact of the customers on an over multiple years. Instead of having those rate increases significant every few years, their bills are much higher if you do that than if you have incremental rate increases year over year. So that's the philosophy we have had for a long time as a city, and we'll continue to do that. And so the next one is
Brian,
Yes.
question.
Just on the percentage for the reserve fund balance, do the rating agencies, you said they like to see a higher rate. Is there a number that they like to see? When you say higher, what does that mean?
and I can have our CFO, Mike Kennington, come up here. As far as I'm aware, the higher, the better. They don't give us a number, unfortunately, Mayor and Councilmember Spilsbury.
You
I
said
wish we
higher, and
had
I'm wondering what they think is
target.
higher.
Oh, they would love 300%. I mean, if you asked that, no. But that's why 20%, our target is where we believe.
But we're dropping quite a bit lower than that in the forecast. So I'm just wondering, like, do they still think that's higher or that, I mean,
So, Mayor.
I want Mike to come up.
I was trying to save Mike from that.
I need more Mike, more Mike.
Councilmember Spilsbury.
He doesn't get enough opportunities
right.
to come up here.
As Brian said, the credit rating agencies look at a variety of metrics, right? And fund balance is one of the important ones that they look at. So they have a typical profile for whatever credit rating, for a AAA, a AA, and so on and so forth, right? And so the 20% is, probably where we're at today, because they say this is where you guys, with your metrics, this is where you line up. But then they look at other qualitative factors as well to either push it up or push it below. So they start with these metrics, these objective, quantifiable metrics, and they rate us, and then they go to their committee, look at qualitative factors to go up or down. So, 20% could be, I believe, is where we're at today, and then they discuss on pushing us up or down.
So they don't compare us to like other municipalities, like, oh, they have a higher one than this city. Like it's purely based off of their own.
Yeah, it's a profile they put for these credit ratings, and then they say, okay, Mesa does this well, does this poorly, right? And it could push up or down.
They don't have a number
They
you're
do.
targeting.
I mean, they do, but it's one of many metrics that they look at. So we could have a 5%, but then we could, our liquidity could be great, our debt profile could be great. So it's just one of many.
It's like a person's individual credit rating, right? I mean, they would look at the totality of your history, your income, all of that to come up with, well, you may have debt, but if you can pay for that, then your rating's still going to be high, or your credit score is still going to be high. I mean, that's essentially what they do for it. They look at the totality of our history of payments, what we've done as a city, how we've been able to manage debt and obligations over the years, and that's all part of that formula.
Because I know that these financial principles, there's 5 of them that we're trying to do, but maybe, I don't know, do we focus too much on that percentage sometimes, or is it still something we really need to?
No, it's still, I would say it's still very important. And so that's one of the factors of that credit score. It's one of the
Yes.
factors that we look at as far as the forecast that Brian looks at.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, Mayor and Councilmember Spilsbury, that what Brian alluded to, the fact that right now those smooth and more incremental rate adjustments are even a bigger priority. Because like you said, if we were trying to get right back up to 20% right
We'd
now,
have to
that would
do
have a
it.
huge impact
Yeah.
on rates, and that's obviously not something that we want to do. But that's a factor. We know we need to build that reserve back up, and we have a plan over years to get that number higher. But it's more important to our ratepayers that they have that predictability from the city.
Okay, obviously I was going through this presentation yesterday and noticed how much lower than 20% we're dropping. So I just didn't know if that was, what the actual credit rating agencies are saying. So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Heredia has a question.
I think just to point out on the percentage, it's a good, I think we always talk about these percentages over the years that I've been on the council, and even in our general fund balance, right? We always end up really higher than what we projected, right? At least as it's been on my experience as I've been on the council, right? So I think it's just understanding the complexity of these things, right? And how I think it's a good target, but also, what Mike was saying, what other factors play into this part, and how we want to make sure we leverage our opportunities to bring about more businesses and offer that friendly business atmosphere, right? And seeing that, comparing, what the household rate is and how, those kinds of things, because people would like to compare us to our neighbors, but, in the prior conversation, we see, it's the capacity fee that we're proposing actually lower than some of our neighbors close by here in the East Valley, right? And so it's just something to think about as we move forward with these discussions, is that, it's not the end all be all. It's an important indicator as far as these percentages, but it's much more complex than that. That we are, we need to make sure we monitor these pieces, right? So.
Thank you, Mike. Brian?
So the other one that we like to look at also is, which we'll get into in this presentation, is the equity between residential and non-residential. For many years, it was not as equal to where, as it was alluded previously in the previous presentation, where we were heavily residential city, and now we're starting to get more commercial. So we're looking to have that equity between the residential revenue and consumption compared equally to the commercial revenue and consumption. And then the other one is the affordability of the utility service itself. So what I wanted to do is give council an overview of what the Audit and Finance Committee recommended. So we gave this presentation to the Audit and Finance Committee, and they had some good questions for us and also a recommendation. So what we showed the Audit and Finance Committee was, this is the cash flow, the forecast that we presented to council for the 25-26 adopted budget. And what I wanted to point out here, where it's highlighted in red, is one is the total net sources and uses. As you see, the net sources and uses, even for the actuals for fiscal year 23-24 and projected for 24-25, are negative, and they're negative all the way through most of the forecast until we get to 29-30. And then also, as what we were just talking about with our percentage of ending reserve balance, in the outer years, we dropped below even the 8 to 10%, which is our financial policy. We're down to 4.9, 4.6, and then coming back up to about 7. So that's what I wanted to show. And with this forecast includes the rate adjustments that were presented to council last November and December. So we didn't touch any of that. It's just the budget was the utility budgets, any increases in operations and maintenance and capital costs, and we did not adjust those rate adjustments. So what we showed to the Audit and Finance Committee was here's the recommended rates that we presented. And there's two things going on here in this forecast. So what we did is, as you see down below, the water and waste and the water, the two, we were able to decrease those a little bit. So in the previous slide, it was 6% for the water residential tier 1. We were able to reduce it down to 5.5%. But we were also looking, we increased the water commercial usage up to 12%. And that's where that equity comes into, to where we wanted to get equity between residential and non-residential somewhere within the forecast. And for right now, we had 28-29. So this was the rate adjustments to be able to get that equity between residential and non-residential in fiscal year 28-29. What we also did is, as we discussed just previously about credit rating agencies and our net sources and uses, what we're able to do is slightly restructure our debt payments. So what we previously do is we would calculate what it would be to pay off 35% of the principal within the first 10 years. So with utility debt, we issue in 24-year maturity. So it's 24-year debt, similar to your mortgage where you can either have a 20 or 30. So we do 24 years. And what we have done in the past was want to pay that principal, 35% of that principal off within the first 10 years. Well, what we looked at was, what if we were able to slide that back a little and do 30%? And we were still comfortable with how that debt service payment looked in the outer years with drawing it back to about 30%. And that's where I highlighted the net sources and uses, is where now with doing the parity or the equity between residential and non-residential and sliding and restructuring our debt a little bit, we were able to get our net sources and uses from a negative in that fiscal year 28-29 to a positive $10 million. And also, if you look at the ending reserve balance, we were at, where it says 8, we were at 4.9. Now we're at 8. The other one was about another 4. We're at 9.2. And then the last one was at 7. We're at 13.4. So we were taking a look at how our cash flow was, and we do feel comfortable with what we presented to Audit and Finance. But what Audit and Finance was recommending was, kind of mentioned before, was what if we were able to make that equity a little bit sooner than fiscal year 28-29? And so the staff went back, as you see here, the top one was what was presented to Audit and Finance. So the top 2 rows are residential rate revenue and non-residential rate revenue. As you see, the residential rate revenue in, say, fiscal year, the first column, fiscal year 24-25, we were at 55% revenue was coming from residential and 45% was coming from non-residential. However, if you go down to the next 2 lines, residential consumption was 49% and non-residential was 51%. So non-residential was consuming more of the water but contributing less revenue to the fund. So that's the equity that we're looking at, is what would it be if we were able to get to around 50-50? And so what we did was say, okay, what if we did it in 28-29? What would the rate adjustments look like? And that was what was in the previous slide. The Audit and Finance came back and recommended what if we could do it sooner. So we looked at 27-28. And so with the 27-28, and just to remind council that we are in the fiscal year 25-26, so really that fiscal year there is really only a half of a fiscal year, because if the council moves forward and adopts these rate adjustments, they don't go into effect until January or February, usually the following year. So that's really of the following calendar year. So it's really only a half of a fiscal year. So really it's 2 fiscal years to where we would be catching up. So about 2.5 years, we would have equity within that.
Brian, Ms. Spilsbury.
I mean, you started to answer it, but I guess why wouldn't we just do it in the 26, 27 then? If we're trying to get there, what's the reason why we don't do that?
So we'll get to that and we'll talk about that, because what we need to do then is see what would the rate adjustments be, because we would have to increase the non-commercial rate adjustments at a certain percentage to be able to get that revenue within the next year and a half rather than 2.5 years. And we were looking at the rate adjustments, and we have a slide in our support that we can show you, but they would be significant rate adjustments
So
to the
are we
non-
just worried about commercial users having too big of a change all at once?
Yes. Mayor?
It would have been some dramatic sticker shock to do it sooner than this, but we feel this accomplishes the desire of Audit and Finance to see us get there sooner with still producing reasonable increases on the commercial side that wouldn't be as much sticker shock for them.
Okay, and do we hear from commercial users about water rates like we do from residential?
You would if we moved it
If
faster.
it was, then we would be hearing from them too. Okay, I'm just wondering if we've been saying for a while that there was some inequity there on what people were paying, and so why wouldn't we try to move that along faster? But
And I think Mayor and Councilmember and Brian alluded to this part of it was the intentionality, right or wrong, of previous councils to want to have the difference in the rate. And so that's why we didn't want to be punitive to our commercial users, because this was a intentional desire of the city of Mesa in the past to want to keep those rates low as a form of economic development tool, for lack of a better term. But we're certainly in a different time and a different era of that, and so that's why we wanted to balance.
so we purposefully had commercial lower to try to attract that or something, because I don't know. I guess maybe I don't remember when all of the, I don't know the history on it or when decisions were made or whatever, but.
Brian could probably, this is before him and before you were in your role, as no one on this dais was there, I think, really when that philosophy was set
Maybe
out.
one
This was-
person.
No, I actually think Candace maybe could correct me, but I think this even predates Councilmember Summers' first time,
thank goodness.
if I'm not mistaken. I think this goes back to Mayor Hawker's.
So at one point,
yeah.
we were saying it was okay for our residents to pay more so that we can get economic growth to our city, essentially. I mean, I'm probably simplifying that way too much, but you're saying that was kind of the philosophy. I thought
I think probably if I speak for that council and that mayor back at the time, it was more of we want to keep our commercial rates low, no matter what the consequence was. Well, the consequence was higher rate on residential.
Because
Yeah,
I just
so,
kind of assumed the inequity happened just because of the massive growth and things kind of just got out of hand with not out of hand because it's a good thing, but we ended up getting so much more commercial that they just sort of happened. I didn't really grasp that there was a philosophy behind that, so.
yeah,
If I
I'm
can,
not
Mayor.
aware of a philosophy in that direction. Because I maybe there was a little bit because Keno always talked about bedroom to boardroom, but this has been historically a residential neighborhood or city.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably maybe a little bit of philosophy, but a lot of what you discussed where the commercial industrial growth has been a focus and just exploded beyond our capacity to keep up with these.
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Spilsbury, also, the consumption of the water was heavily residential up to about a year or two ago. And so once that flipped over to where the consumption is now more commercial, but we're seeing the revenue coming into the fund more dominant on residential, that we wanted to start doing that parity, because as we were doing the forecast, we saw the percentages start growing in more different directions. And we wanted to kind of get that equity back in line to where we had the revenues of the non-residential being equal to what their consumption was of their percentage of the consumption. So that's kind of where it flipped just a few years ago to where commercial has now,
Catch up to that.
yep, now commercial is consuming more than residential, where previously it was residential consuming more than commercial.
All right. Mr. Reddy has a
I
question.
think
followed
it
by
just
Ms. Goforth.
my point on, I asked this in the audit and finance, is just making on the tier side, on the commercial, because majority of businesses are small businesses, right? Like I lease out some space here in West Mesa, a couple thousand square feet, and you just making sure that we are not burdening, because when these increases happen, right, like the landlord just passes through to the tenant, right? And so it's just keeping an eye on those tier rates as we do with residential, right? And as we're building on the commercial side, looking at how these tier rates, are not detrimental, impacting especially small businesses, right? Like I think that's an important take for me as my experience on being a leasee in Mesa. So
Sure, Mayor and Council Member Heredia, when Eric Hansen comes up and we get into the wastewater rates, we pulled some data together. We knew that was a concern of yours, so we have some data to speak to that, help you understand that better.
Ms. Goforth.
So I'm a little confused on this, and Brian, you actually said it, where we want the commercial who are consuming more to pay commensurate with their consumption. But we're getting it to pay. Why are we doing parity? Why aren't we following the consumption rates? So if they consume 51%, then the revenue that they pay is 51% of the total. Why are we getting to 50-50?
Mayor and council member Goforth, we're looking to get 50-50, but then as you look out in the outer years, then they are. So if you look at, the bottom chart, if you look at 28-29, residential revenue is 49% and they're consuming 48% of the water. So non-residential is 51% of the revenue coming in and 52% of the water. So in the outer years, and then in 29-30, they're actually 47 for residential of revenue and 47 for consumption. So that's where we're looking to get that parity, that equity, but then in the outer years, they're equal to what
So
the
it's just
consumer
taking
revenue.
more time to flip it
Yes,
to equal their consumption.
yes.
Right, as
Okay.
Mr. Butler said, if we did it in a more immediate fashion, there would be, and we have some slides to show, because we did analyze that, so we'll show you what those rates would look like.
Okay.
All right, continue on.
So with that recommendation from the Audit and Finance Committee, this is the recommended rate adjustments without, I wanted to note on the left-hand side, without a water and wastewater capacity fee. So this is if council decides not to move forward with the capacity fee, this is what the rate adjustments that staff would recommend. And as you see, with the net sources and uses, it is negative for the first few years, but in the outer years, we're starting to, the revenue coming in from the commercial and the residential and the rate adjustments, we're at positive net sources and uses. And then also we're at 8%, 9%, 13, and 19. We're close to that 20% in the final year that we would like to be at. And the big thing that I wanted to indicate was I wanted to highlight the top two. So the water residential tier 1, that would be at 4%, and previously it was at 5.5%. So, and then with the water commercial, that was at 12%, now it's at 14%. So there's where the flip is for that equity, is we were able to take some of that burden off of the residential and lower that adjustment, and then put a little bit more of that burden on the non-residential to get that equity sooner.
So you said this chart that you just showed us doesn't have the capacity fee. So what changes with the capacity fee?
So Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, thank you for the question. Once we get through the department's individual presentation, they will show kind of what the
At the
difference
end?
is. And then I will show at the
Slides.
end,
Okay.
at the very end, what the difference is between if council moved forward with the capacity fee and not move forward with the
Okay.
capacity fee. And with that, I will have Chris and Eric come up and talk about the.
Well, going back to the slide,
Yes.
the slide you just left, it's going to take us about a year to generate $18 million of capacity fee if we move with that, correct?
Correct. That's our estimate.
So.
So, I
yes,
mean, we're doing 25, 26 now, but we're not going to generate those monies till 26.
That is true. So, Mayor, thank you for the comment. So what we'll do at the end of the presentation, so what the capacity fee is going to do is right now in this forecast are those projects that Chris and Jesse mentioned in the previous one. So the Signal Butte debt service is in this forecast. All those wells are in this forecast. What also happened was what Chris Hassert indicated in the previous presentation too is trying to balance that. Do we do repairs and maintenance or we do a growth project, and trying to balance that out? So what we had to do is, what he mentioned was $180 million was pushed out of this forecast. Well, with that capacity fee, if we take those growth projects out, we're able to start put some of those repairs and maintenance back into this forecast. And I'll show you that forecast at the end.
Okay, great. Eric's coming up.
Well, Eric Hansen, he's our utilities financial analyst. While Eric comes up and gets set up, I'm going to turn it to Eric. He's going to go through, I'm going to stay up here to answer questions. A couple themes, though, I just want to lay out. One we've talked about pretty extensively already, which is to try to achieve that equity between the customer classes in terms of where the money's coming from, where the revenue's coming from. The other is to continually try to keep our residential rates as low as we can. And then one other point I wanted to make is this, it was 2 years ago actually where things flipped, where the non-residential sector started to actually use more water than the residential sector. It was about 2 years ago. And one thing that we all need to keep in mind, that's permanent. That's never going to change. We're never going to flip back because, as I stated earlier today, most of the development we have ahead of us, by and large, it's commercial. It's 90% commercial. So we're never going to flip back. So that's why we're on this path. The only question is timing, how soon we get there. And the capacity fee plays into it. You'll see that in the slides we're going to talk about. So I'll turn it over to Eric.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. I think it's already been said. We're going to start with, within the Water Resources Department, the water program and our recommended rate adjustments there. Then we'll move to the wastewater program and our recommendations there. And then we'll follow that up with a brief description of what our recommendations would be with the capacity fee. So the capacity fee that Chris and Jesse just got done speaking about. So with that, we typically like to start with talking about our two biggest revenue requirements, operating costs and debt service. So this for our water program, our operating costs. Our operating costs, the raw water we purchase, the chemicals we buy, the electricity we buy, the people that run the department, our operating costs. So projected for this fiscal year, 25-26, about $85 million projected operating cost. That's up from about $57.5 million back in fiscal year 2021. And then in those out years, you can see it drawn down a little bit from our previous forecast. So our previous forecast is that gray line that you can kind of see behind it. So a little bit of cost savings there, about $2 million in fiscal years 28, 29, and 29, 30. And again, it's already been alluded here to, but we use this type of data so we can plan for smooth rate increases. So we know these costs are coming and we can slowly ramp up our rate adjustments if appropriate. So I mentioned this previously, debt service, water's other major revenue requirement, here estimated for fiscal year 25-26 at about $69 million. That's up from 39 million, almost 40 million in fiscal year 2021. And you can see that increase from fiscal year 24-25 to 25-26 as payments become due on those big three projects. So the Central Mesa Reuse Pipeline, AMI, our treatment plant expansion over at Signal Butte, But also, I think Brian talked to it a little bit in his discussion. You can see the effects of that refinancing of the debt, drawing down our forecast almost $5 million in fiscal year 28, 29, and 29, 30, about $2 million. And we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on this. A big part of these increasing costs that we're experiencing is inflation. So if you look back to fiscal year 17, 18, to just last year, fiscal year 24, 25, we've experienced about a 33% increase in inflation. While at the same time, your typical commercial customer has seen about a 24% increase in their water bill. Our typical residential commercial has seen about a 17% increase in the water bill. And that again gets to the city's philosophy with regards to doing things slow and incrementally. We'll get there, while also applying those rate increases to ensure equity as our customer profile changes.
Question.
Yeah.
Eric, so I had asked if you could put in the chart your increase, and I know it's the previous, but your operating costs, how does that compare? What's the percentage
Sure.
increase over the same amount of time?
I'll chime in on that. So Mayor, Councilmember, go forth. So our operating costs cumulative over the same time period has been 66% change. So quite a bit more than the 17% for the cumulative residential effective rate increase and the 24 commercial. And then if you want to look at a subset of that, so overall 66% total O&M budget. If you look at during the same time period, look at just all of our labor, our staff labor, it's pretty much in line with that 33% CPI. It's a little higher. It's in total 41, but that takes into consideration additional head count too. So if you just look at the increase in salary, it's going to be really close to CPI. But what makes our overall O&M so much higher is just the fact that a lot of chemicals have doubled in price, electricity has gone up, and most notably our raw water, the Colorado River water we buy, has more than doubled over this time horizon. So when you look at the doubling of very significant pieces of the O&M, that paints a pretty stark picture.
Yeah, this was my question, is how the difference, why the operating costs have gone up so much more than the CPI. But you're saying that the personnel, that cost is fairly consistent with what we're seeing,
Correct.
what we saw, 41 compared to 33%?
Right, because the Phoenix area CPI cumulative over that period is just over 30%. If you take out additional staff we've hired, because that counts into it, we're going to be really close to the CPI for staff. It's just these other input costs that are beyond our control, like buying the raw water, the chemicals, electricity. Those have gone up 2x, some of those.
And so that is what is really influencing the difference in that. Okay.
So that explains why we eat into our reserve fund balance. So you have two choices. You eat into the reserve fund balance and you start pulling that down, or you defer projects.
And so maybe this is a dumb question, but are those some of our most significant costs? I mean, obviously the water is, but the chemicals and, of our overall costs?
Correct. So the water, there was a time where water was quite a small piece compared to our staff labor. Now the cost of raw water is getting closer and closer to just what it costs to employ the whole water resources staff.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
On the cost, we run some of the plants, and I know we're in a joint agreement on 91st Avenue plant, so what are our costs doing compared to the joint plant over at 91st as far as cost increases?
Eric, do you have thoughts on that?
We also have the Val Vista.
Val Vista. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah, Val Vista's shared also.
On the water side, it's the Val Vista plant, and on the wastewater side, it's the 91st Avenue plant. We call SHROG, it's the sub-regional operating group. So if you had some thoughts.
Yeah, well, actually, as we move to wastewater, because that's going to be 91st Avenue, you'll actually see it on the chart that I provide you with regards to our previous forecast and our current forecast, the black line. We've actually been passed about a $2 million increase with regards to cost of energy and chemicals there at that plant, increasing our operating costs on the wastewater side. So that didn't come from our...
Do you want to address that when we get to the slide so we can?
Yes, sir.
Why don't we do that? That way we have the visual up there,
Absolutely.
and
Yes,
that'll
sir.
help all of us. Thank you.
Yep. So I think Brian stole my thunder on this one, but again, this shows where our residential, non-residential rate revenue reach 50-50 parity in fiscal year 27-28. And then again, fiscal year 29-30, reaching equity with regards to consumption and rate revenue. So to accomplish this, to maintain financial stability in the department and to further encourage equity between our customer classes, our recommendation is going to be a 4.5% increase to the service charge. Now that's the charge that everyone pays. It's that base charge that you pay based on the size of your meter. Then for the usage charge, our residential customers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, apply a 4%, 5.5%, 6.5%, 7.5% increase respectively to those 4 tiers. And then to create equity between our residential and multi-unit customers, apply a 14.5% increase to the usage component of our multi-unit customers. Moving on to our non-residential customers here, our commercial customers. So commercial general, not commercial landscape, applying a 14% increase to the usage component and that excess water surcharge for our commercial customers. And then for our landscape customers, our non-residential landscape customers, applying a 15% increase to both the usage component and the excess water surcharge for those customers. And then for those large customers, those customers that use over 7,500 kgals a month, who we have a few of, apply a 20% increase to the usage component of their rate. And for our interdepartmental customers, this is the water that we sell ourselves, apply about a 9.8% increase to the usage component there.
Question.
I was just realizing, when you say multi-unit development, which was on the previous slide, what is that, what falls under that category?
So these are developments who are served by like one master meter. So you could have, a triplex, 3 units served by 1 meter, and we only charge 1 service charge to that meter. So if it was a 1.5-inch meter, currently we charge them about $51. That service charge would then be spread out, so divided by 3 for the 3 units. So they'd really be paying about $17 for the service charge.
Or divided by 2? I mean, is it divided by however many units it
Yes,
is?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is there a potential that people living in their house that happen to live in a multi-unit development are going to be paying that really high rate?
Yeah, and so that's why we looked at probably the most conservative example. If they're a duplex, they're probably going to be on our residential rate because you probably don't want to be splitting your bill with your neighbor. But a triplex, we have those served by a 1.5-inch meter, which might be a little bit oversized for that type of development, but we have it.
So then splitting it by 3 would be closer to what?
Absolutely.
Resident.
Absolutely, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. And then if you were to split it by 6, then you'd be looking at like an $8.50 service charge split 6 ways.
So as far as like, I'm thinking of, multifamily housing apartments and condos and all the, like how, those are typically metered separately or?
So if they have a master, so condos, townhomes, apartments. They typically are served by one master meter, and we send that bill to the property owner, and they either sub-meter each of those units and divvy up that bill according to their consumption, or they just divvy up the bill equally among the tenants, because there's not as much discretionary use in multi-unit dwellings, whereas in a
Because they're
single.
not paying for all the other
Yes, ma'am.
stuff or whatever. Okay, so we've really looked at that to make sure that people living in an apartment that are already maybe having a hard time getting by aren't going to be paying a higher rate.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're going to show you on the next slide that the effective rate, when it's all said and done with these increases, the multi-unit customer is still paying less than the tier one residential customer.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't even know, yeah, I would like that explained at some point, please.
Okay, so
He's like, okay, I will.
before we go to that slide, Mayor, Council, I think this will help answer Councilmember Heredity's earlier question with commercial. So, and I think we have a chart or a table that.
You want me to go to the backup slide?
Yeah, while you're doing that, if you could, while you're doing that. So one thing you have to keep in mind is we're keeping the service charge increase across all customer classes low at 4.5% increase. So for the commercial, a small commercial property that doesn't have a lot of landscaping and is not a very water intensive business, a small commercial business that uses 3 kgals or less, you're not even getting hit by any of these usage increases. You're only experiencing that 4.5%, because 3 kgal is already baked into your rate. It's already baked into that base rate. So you would just see the 4.5% increase as an effective change to your bill. Any usage beyond that, then that'll be subject to those increases in the table. And Eric is looking for a backup slide that gets.
I was failing at
into
doing
that.
it the other way, so let me just push on through here. Yeah. All right, almost there. Here we go.
That's the best presentation ever.
Yeah, done. So the slide before you, because we have so much seasonality between our residential customers going from the winter to the summer, we kind of broke it down between average winter consumption and average summer consumption. During the winter, about 30% of our residential accounts don't use more than 3,000 kgals or 3 kgals. So reality of it is they're paying their service charge. They're not paying any usage charge. If they have a 3/4 inch meter, they're paying $32. We're about to go into what your typical customer pays. Our typical customer, they use about 6 kgals. Again, during the winter, about 60% of our customers use 6 kgals or less. During the summer, about 49% of our customers use 6 kgals or less, again, falling in that first tier. Even in the summer, you have just over 46% of your customers falling in, I call it tier 0, but within just paying the service fee. And if you even look a little bit broader, during the winter, 90% of your customers fall in tier 1 or 2. During the summer, it's more like 80% of your customers fall within tier 1 and 2. And so that's, gets to our, philosophy of trying to keep that service charge as low as possible, because it helps protect the people who use the least, who may not have the most means. And this also applies to our commercial customers. We have about 5,500 commercial customers, and about a third of those don't use more than 3 kgals. So, again, they're only paying that service charge as well. So currently, if you were a small business using 2 or 3 kgals on a 3/4 inch line, you're paying $32 and change a month in your water bill. What we'll show you here in a second is our typical customer who uses, that's that person right there at 50%. 50% use more, 50% use less. They're at about 9 kgals, and that's who we use to show our typical customer. So they will include some of that usage component as well in their bill. So you can see their bill will change a little bit. But again, that's one way that we protect our smaller consumers is by trying to keep that service charge as low as possible.
And before we leave this slide, in the Audit and Finance, Councilmember Heredia, you wanted to see raw numbers, like how many actual customers. So in that tier 0, which is really, you're paying no usage charge because you're getting the first 3,000 gallons a month, all the way up to 6,000, you can see there's about almost 81,000 customers in the winter. If you remember in our capacity fee presentation for a 3/4 inch meter, there's about 128,000 total residential customers. So you can see 80,000 is a pretty significant portion of the 128 that is in that tier 0 or tier 1. And now Eric's gonna get
We'll get
into
right back there.
what the impact is to the customer, the effective impact when you blend, if you want to think of it, a blended rate between the increase with service charge and usage.
Let's see if I can get this done right this time. All right.
I think you got to go
Actually,
back.
that's with the
That's with the impact, so you got to go back
impact fee.
with the capacity.
There you go. So, currently, as we were just talking about, our typical residential customer uses about 6 kgals. The column just to the right of where it says residential, that shows their current bill, what they would be paying under our current rate book for those 6 kgals. Then really focus in on that circle, that blue 43%. That is going to be what their effective rate increase is, given that service and usage charge and their consumption of 6 kgals a month. The typical residential customer is going to see a $1.89 increase in their monthly bill. The typical multi-unit customer, again, in that current bill, you can see that discrepancy for 6 kgals for a multi-unit customer versus a residential customer, a discrepancy right now currently of about $3. Going over, you can see our proposed rate adjustments. It would be a just over 10% increase to these customers, raising their monthly bill about $4.10. So, and we just talked about this as well, our commercial general customers, so not the landscape customers, they typically use 9 kgals a month. Their typical bill currently, $78.59. That will go up $6.07, which is an effective increase of 7.7%. And finally, our landscape customers, some of our most discretionary use that we sell, the typical landscape customer using almost 30 kgals a month, 29 kgals a month. You can see their current bill at $177.01. That would go up about 11.8% or about $20.87 a month.
Where does the city fall in that? What usage are we?
Well, it depends on where we're looking.
I mean, for parks and everything that we have, are we considered commercial or are we considered?
We have our own interdepartmental rate.
Okay.
And if I can get into a little bit of that, if you'd like me to.
No, stay on track.
Okay, all right.
You're doing a very good job.
All right.
Vice Mayor was going to kick you out.
Well, I need to kick him. Ms. Pillsbury.
So the multi-unit development then, that's the number that's going to the meter that's then divided.
So the number that's going to the meter is going to be the total consumption for all of the units that meter serves. So for instance, if a 1.5 inch meter serves 6 units and each of those units uses 6 kgals at the meter, we're going to read that as 6 kgals used. charge them for those 6 kgals, and then also apply the $51 service charge for that meter. The property owner is either, if it's sub-metered, they're going to apply that proportionally based off of what their meters have to say, but we only read the meter that's in the front of the unit, and we only charge them one service charge.
So the $4.10 a month that would be an impact for, the average user, is that per unit?
That would be per unit, absolutely.
So they
Yes, ma'am.
are paying, well, I just don't want people, and people who live in condos or townhomes doesn't necessarily mean that they are low income. That's not what I'm saying, but a lot of them are. And so I don't want them to be impacted with a higher rate.
Great, absolutely. Again, look,
But I get that probably every single property is different, so I don't know.
And that's what makes it difficult, but we looked at probably the most conservative example, which would be a triplex. And so served by a 1.5-inch line, divided 3 ways, and then applied typical consumption to that development. If it was a 6-plex, like we were just talked about, that service charge would be divided 6 ways. And so it would be even lower than, that impact would be even less because they see less of that service charge.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I just don't know how to get around this concern that I have.
Well, another way to look at it is the multifamily customer benefits because there's only one meter that serves. You get a meter, and then they have the lines that split off into the apartment complex.
If it's an apartment complex.
Or a
okay.
condo complex. And they all get the benefit because they get to split X amount of ways the service charge. If it's your house, you're paying the whole base fee. But if there's 20 units, they're splitting, and most likely the apartment manager or the HOA management company is going to split it by however many units equally. So you're going to see less of an impact to your unit just because there's in numbers. So you can
Let's go for it.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So explain this to me, the way I'm looking at it as well. Per gallon, is that a way to look at it?
Per kgal?
Per kcal. As we have it, currently a residential customer pays more than a multi-unit customer
Tier 2.
in Tier 2.
Yeah, and that's kind of why we looked at it falling at that 6th kgal, because the idea being as we create, as we focus on equity this year, next year, that per kgal hopefully falls right there at that Tier 2 residential. So whereas if a multi-unit development customer were to use 7 kgals, that's in line with that 7th kgal of what a residential customer would use. And so, we are aware of it, and we are bringing them to parity, and and through this, hopefully creating equity between residential and multi-unit.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense to me I think that's making an assumption about an income, so, but yet we know a multi-unit has more of an impact, not only on our water, but on all the other services in the city, right? So, and then if you go down to landscape, which we know is the most discretionary, they're paying even less per kcal. Why would we do that?
Well,
I don't understand that philosophy.
And maybe that gets to the history of that landscape rate, in that we only broke that rate off about 5 years ago. And we kept it the same as the other non-residential increases for a couple years. And, we finally have started to increase that rate. And so we will continue to increase that rate. It's a great way to make up that inequity between the residential and non-residential customers, because it is such a discretionary use.
Right.
So we are aware of it. Yes,
Right,
ma'am.
so we're charging a resident to use water in their home more per kcal than we're charging a business to water their lawn. I mean, and which is kind of counter to our conservation philosophy here at the city, I guess. And I know we're trying to get it back to where, but what's the time frame on that? And how long have we been working on it? It's really confusing me why we would do that.
So,
Do you have thoughts you
yeah,
want to comment?
I do have some thoughts. You know, the way that we have our residential usage tiers set up is, you know, 50% of our customers use 6 kgals or less, and they pay $3.87 or $3.72 currently for each kgal. The current landscape rate, non-residential landscape rate per kgal is $4.76. As customers use more discretionary water and fall into tier 2, is that what you're seeing? Does that make sense? Like, but I understand they've just gone over up one tier. Why should they now be paying less, or why should landscape be less than? Yeah, and I understand that, and that is why we are raising commercial landscape rates at the pace that we are. You know, 15% is the most we've ever done, and you know, this is, you know, the future is. We'll see.
Well, the future is conservation of water.
Yes.
They're not making any more water. Ms. Spilsbury, I maybe cut you off. Did you get your questions all answered?
Well, I'm just confused on it all, to be honest, so I'll probably just follow up, because I still just am not very guaranteed that people aren't paying more than someone else. I get that some would be and some wouldn't be, so, and I don't know how to get around that issue, because
Yeah.
it's really complicated depending on the way property owners handle their properties. And you have an incredibly wide range of income on those types of properties, and so some people are probably totally fine paying more and others aren't. So I don't know what the answer is, so.
Okay. You know, I'm happy to get on a
But
whiteboard.
we can follow it up
and
later,
draw this.
so.
I really enjoy this stuff, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
You
Well,
really
and the-
enjoy this stuff.
And Mayor, council member, I mean, and this truly, you know, giving the notice of intent gives that time, both the
Yeah.
dialogue that we're having internally and the dialogue with the community on this. So yeah, we've got some time to dive as deep into this as you know.
Yeah,
would like to.
we all know, we hear it every day, how bad people are hurting and paying their bills, and I'm on the Mesa Can board, and they're just not able to help even a fraction of the people who are really struggling paying their utility bills right now. And anyway, so I want to be very, very aware of like the impact that we're having on our customers, especially residential, and that's one of the ones that stuck out to me as possibly concerning. And so we can have a meeting. That would be great.
That'd be great.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, so a couple of things. We're here to get your direction. So this is our proposal for the in particular, the landscape commercial meter. If there's a feeling from council that we should be more aggressive in terms of bringing that rate up, we'll take that.
And we've
input.
done that before. We have changed that rate for specific customers.
Yeah, because this is just a study session.
Yeah.
We aren't at the introduction phase yet. That's coming up. So we could take that, if it's council's direction to model that being a little bit more significant of a rate increase, we can look at that.
Well, why don't you look at a rate increase and then.
Is the notice of intent the deadline, or the introduction is the deadline of when we have to have this figured out? Because I know those are two different dates.
December 1st, I thought we were voting on it.
Well, that's the vote, but there's two different
Yes,
dates.
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury. So the notice of intent sets the maximum limit
Oh,
of
the
adjustment.
maximum, okay.
But
So
we can
if
always decrease from
we could
there.
always decrease from there. If council wanted to increase something, we would have to redo the notice of intent, which starts the 60 days. So
Okay.
once we do a notice of intent, we then have 60 days for introduction and adoption. So council can come back and say, you know what, we want to lower this rate, we can do that within the 60 days. If council says, you know what, we want to raise this rate within those 60 days, we would have to then go and redo a notice of intent, and that starts the 60 days over again.
And if we are potentially looking at raising the landscaping rate, then that would need to be done before we do that notice of intent.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Just a comment, with the landscaping rate, I think getting some degree of, to Councilmember Goforth's favorite word, parity with the residential rate on the commercial landscaping makes a lot of sense. But I would caution if that amount goes up too much, think about when we bring a project forward, we require landscaping trees, especially over parking lots where there's a heat island effect. How often now do we see, particularly in some of these big box developments, when they get a little tight in the money, they just start turning the water off and the trees start dying and the shade starts going down and the place starts looking like crap, right? So if you raise these rates too much, as soon as the development's done, they're just going to shut the water off and let it die, and then we're into a code enforcement issue. So I think there's a balance here of trying to be fair and equitable to our residents' rates, but also understanding that we want to encourage these commercial developers to maintain a very nice landscape, because that's part of our community and give us some community pride. So I would hope we'd have a little bit deeper discussion about that if we're going to raise those rates.
And we'll look into that, and we can have some additional conversations before the notice of intent on the 22nd. And you're right, it somewhat goes back to the philosophy that we discussed earlier of trying to just avoid sticker shock immediately, but ease into, over the course of a few years, more parity in that regard. So, but we can look at that, and we've got some time to have some conversations before that final posting a week from today.
And Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, Eric was not kidding. We can come visit you and walk you through it in a little bit more detail outside of the noise of the study session, because we want you to be clear on what we're proposing.
I can't find the slide. Is it the 22nd? The 22nd of this month is the notice of intent. And so you said we could have more conversations about when would we do that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think through those one-on-one conversations, we can go back and look at too, based on the conversation this morning, and we can always make adjustments to the final posting and recommendation before that happens next Thursday evening. So based on some of those conversations, because again, if we're just setting the max of that, if we feel and have some additional conversations and feel that need to be adjusted, that doesn't mean that's what council's going to adopt. But if you'd like us to do that, and then we can continue to have the discussion over that 60-day period before we actually adopt the rates on December.
So would we talk about that at the study session the night of the 22nd then, since we're doing strategic planning on the 18th, or could we talk about this on the 18th?
We could definitely do that. But in order to post,
I think we would all need to look at it to make that decision, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Staff can have some one-on-one conversations after we look at the numbers to try to understand that. We can discuss that on the study session on the 22nd. But because we have to post the notice of intent final language the Thursday prior to that to meet our 24-hour posting notice, we would probably, if it was through the conversations we had and staff looking at this, if we wanted to adjust that rate upward, we might do that.
Just to make sure.
Just to make sure. And then council can always direct us later, no, even though we moved from this percent to this percent, we do want to keep it at this percent after council has more.
And that has to be done by the 18th then?
That would be done by the 18th before our final posting.
Okay.
So I think it'd behoove us to have a maximum rate, and then we can always decrease from there and avoid the additional 60 days of the NOI.
It's just if the public looking at this realizes what we're doing instead of the sticker shock of that's the, I don't know.
Without doubt, but I think of this particular rate class of commercial landscaping that, that might give you a little, we're not giving a residential consumer,
That's true,
the
right.
idea of that the rate could be higher on this. And again, that's just to give council the flexibility to look
go
at this
higher if
more.
we wanted
Exactly,
to.
because
Okay.
you're setting the cap, and if council still wants to explore this idea on the landscaping side, that would just buy you more time to have that discussion before locking in a rate. And we could ultimately be back to where we are today, but that would give you the flexibility if you'd like that. And you're right, depending on the rate class, I wouldn't necessarily, say that if we were talking about a regular residential rate, that might be, that might lead to more confusion than this particular rate class.
All right, gentlemen, where do we leave off?
We have a few slides for wastewater. We'll cover that. You probably don't need to spend a lot of time on the operating and the debt service slide. And then we're going to get to what we've built in up to, which is the side-by-side comparison of the rates you've seen already. And then side-by-side with that will be the rates if we had a capacity fee. So there'll be a difference there.
All right. So moving right along to operating costs, again, operating costs and debt service, the two biggest revenue requirements in the wastewater program. We had mentioned earlier in this presentation a little bit of additional costs incurred forecast for fiscal year 26, 27, 27, 28, and those are chemical and energy-related costs associated with 91st Avenue. Move right along then to debt service. The thing to highlight here in debt service is, again, that refinancing of that debt in the out years, drawing down the forecast, our current forecast from our previous forecast, about $2 million fiscal year 27, 28, 28, 29, and 29, 30. So our rate adjustment recommendations for wastewater, fairly similar to what was recommended last year for both the service and usage component of our customers' bill, our residential customers' bill, a 8% adjustment, 8% increase. And for our non-residential customers, for both the service and usage charge, a 9% increase. So how that would impact our typical customer, our typical residential customer, their current bill, $28.07, it would go up 8% or $2.25 a month. And the typical commercial customer, their bill currently $56.86 a month, it would go up $5.12 a month. So now that we've gotten through the water program and the wastewater program, rate adjustments without a capacity fee, let's look at what they would look like with the capacity fee now. So starting with water, no change to the service charge. However, for tiers 1 and 2, those would drop to, the recommendation would drop down to 3.5%. And for tiers 3 and 4, that recommendation would drop down to 4.5%. For those multi-unit customers, they would see a recommended rate adjustment of, or for their usage component, of 12%. For our commercial customers, in addition to their general and their excess water surcharge general, instead of 14% with the capacity fee, 13%. No change to our landscape recommendation, a 1% change from 20% to 19% for our large commercial customers, and a slight change to our interdepartmental customers, that water that we sell ourselves, down from a 9.82% increase to a 9.29% increase. On the wastewater side, so for both residential service and usage, our recommendation would go from 8% to 7.5%. And on the non-residential side, both service and usage components of their bill going from a 9% recommendation to an 8.5% recommendation. Again, even with these adjustments, there is no change with regards to the anticipated equity, or no change to our existing chart that we've already showed you with regards to equity between our residential and non-residential rate revenue and our residential and non-residential consumption. So this chart very closely matches the previous charts that we showed you, and this is with the capacity fee, so no change there. So these are the last couple slides here. And so taking a look at the difference between the water typical customer, how they would be impacted versus how they would be impacted with the capacity fee. You can see here, with the capacity fee, our recommendation would reduce about 5 cents or a tenth of a percent. So your typical residential customer would see a 4.3% increase to their bill without the capacity fee, would see a 4.2% increase with the capacity fee. The similar story across the board, especially it's prevalent here with the multi-unit customers going from a 10.1% increase to a 8.7% increase. Our commercial customers going from a 7.7% increase to a 7.4% increase, and our landscape customers staying the same because we are not recommending any changes to the usage component of their bills with or without the capacity fee.
Question, Harry?
Yep.
Eric, I'm a little confused because, so this is for a customer that is in tier 1, up to 6 kCals.
Yes, ma'am.
But I thought you said the typical customer was 9 kCals.
The typical commercial customer is 9 kCals.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I misunderstood. Thank you.
No problem. So moving right along to wastewater, here across the board, you're going to see a 0.5% decrease in our recommendation from a rate recommendation without the capacity fee and a recommendation with the capacity fee. So your typical residential customer would see a decrease in our recommendation of about 14 cents a month. And then your typical commercial customer, they would see a reduction of about, looks like about 29 cents a month. So another significant discount there as well. So that is, again, with the capacity or without the capacity fee as compared to with the capacity fee. And that's it.
Questions, Council, Vice Mayor?
On slide 25, on the under the usage charge for residential, when you look at the recommended rate before the adoption, it's 4, 5.5, 6, 7.5. But with the capacity fee added, tiers 1 and 2 are 3.5, 3 and 4 are 4.5. So it's not going up by tier the same way it was if we don't do the capacity fee. What was the philosophy on that? Why did you group them together with the capacity fee added in?
Well, it's more based off of the amount of revenue that we would want to, or we would expect from those tiers based off of the rate increase applied. And you got to also factor in, there's going to be a little bit of price elasticity. So we based them this way to try to get a certain amount of revenue out of each tier that was somewhat similar to how they are set up in the recommended rate adjustment without the capacity fee. So I fumbled around that one a little bit, but
It sounds like the math was easier a little bit.
It was easier to get the same amount of, or the amount of revenue from each tier, while at the same time applying them in a way that still was equitable between tiers 1 and 2 and tiers 3 and 4.
It does seem like if it goes 4, 5, 6, 7, that to the right should also go 3, 4, 5, 6.
You know what, we can run those numbers like that, and then I can show you how the difference between our expected revenue in that manner and the way it's set up now, if that makes sense.
Sure, we could run the model. This was just one iteration of how we chose to run the model to get the results we wanted at the end of the day. We could try another iteration that would conform more with the comments we've heard.
Seems like it makes just more sense for consistency. Otherwise, I don't know what our reason is for not doing it that way.
We'll run the model that way.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be good.
So when our notice of intent, then do we put out the rates with the capacity fee and without the capacity fee, since we haven't voted on whether we're going to do the capacity fee? So like our residents are going to see that? What are people going to look at?
I think the intent right now is to do the notice of intent, and Brian is with the assumption that the capacity fee is going to be adopted. I didn't know which way you were going to go on that.
I'm fine with that if, like,
Or were you
if
doing it
we're
the other
kind
way?
of agreeing that we want to do the capacity fee, because otherwise I think it's just going to confuse an already really confusing situation. I'm trying to make this simpler and clearer for our residents, and I feel like if we put out two charts, that it would just really complicate everything.
So Mayor and Council, the intent was to, with the notice of intent, include without the capacity fee. Because since the council is still going to vote on it that night, we would be able to lower the rates if we needed to, but we would do it as, because that's why we would have the capacity fee first. If the capacity fee passed, then we can introduce the lower rates. But we would do the notice of intent on the 22nd, a little over a week. We would do it with the higher rates because we could always drop it down. So we would do it without the capacity fee. Because if council did not want to move forward with the capacity fee, then we would have those rate adjustments that were already presented.
So we're going to put out a notice of intent with a little bit, I mean, I know that it's not a huge, but with a higher rate. But then we, in December, are planning on essentially voting on these, and it will be a slightly lower rate.
Mayor and council, it
If
can
we
be
approve
if
the
the
capacity.
capacity fee is adopted by council, yes.
So my question on that is during the year 26, when we're collecting capacity fees, we're going to take those fees and apply them to reduce our rate?
So they won't apply to the rate. We will set those aside. What we would do is take out those projects that were identified for the capacity fee out of the forecast, which then would ultimately reduce the rate adjustments in the future years.
Do we have a notice of intent for the capacity fee as well? That's required? Oh, okay.
Yes. So Mayor and Council, yes, Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, the notice of intent for the capacity fee is on the same night, on the 22nd of this month would be the notice of intent. It is a fee, so it follows kind of the same as the fees and charges, to where you have a notice of intent and then you have the 60 days before you can introduce and adopt.
So you're right. This is, with this year being the first year of implementation, presumably of that fee, it will lead to that. In the future, if council were to adopt that fee, we wouldn't run into this with future cycles. But yeah, this is an unfortunate byproduct of having to, do this at the same time. But that had been with the philosophy of that we were going to put the worst case scenario on the rate, and then it can obviously be backed down by council. So, but we can look, especially going into the 22nd, how we can try to simplify some of this, for the public. But there would still be this notion, to your point, that there would be a higher rate that we're assuming would be a lower rate if council were to ultimately adopt the capacity fee.
I think like the few people who are like Eric that love this kind of stuff, that are gonna like dig in on this, then they'll understand it. But we're essentially saying to the public, we're going to add a fee, we're adding the capacity fee, but that will actually make the rates lower, right? It's just confusing. And so like, and like, here's the rates that we're gonna do. And also, they might be a little bit less in December. Like, I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out how we could simplify that.
Yeah, that.
What'd you say, Scott?
I said, this is why we have meetings like this, for clarity.
Again, I mean, I'm always asking us to make things clearer for the public so that they could go on our website and click on something and they'd go, oh, this is what we're doing. And this is hard. You have all the different categories, all the different tiers. Like it just is never very simple, but this does add another layer of complexity to an already complex situation.
It does. It does. I think to your point, though, the simple answer is, part of this is we're trying. We've all seen the notion that the public does love the concept of growth paying for growth. So I think understanding implementing a fee that allows for that would then lower the burden on them and lower the rate on them as a consumer.
They also don't want any increase in their utility rates, though. So that's the challenge.
Well, I think people have to expect as costs go up that we have to keep pace with that. And like we said, we're not even keeping pace with the CPI on those cost increases. It's just a reality of the business that we're in, that the chemicals and the other things go up. And I mean that, but that is again back to the philosophy of small and steady, as small as possible and steady increases on that so that we avoid the sticker shock. So.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, maybe sort of a hidden benefit or maybe a silver lining. And if you go to the next slide, item 26, by giving the notice for the higher rates without the capacity fee, it'll give council a little bit more flexibility also to adopt those higher rates. For example, I'll just pick up large commercial. If we give the notice at the 20%, council may decide to actually, close that gap a little bit faster, leave that at the 20% at the higher notice rate. And then you'll have some flexibility on the residential side to maybe tweak that a little bit and look at opportunities there to close the gap a little bit on that side by reducing it a little bit there, by leaving it at the higher rates that are in that left column there.
Good advice. One thing, listening to the conversation, I know 2 or 3 years ago when I was on audit finance, we identified that a flip in residential and commercial water usage. And so we pushed back on lowering the rates or keeping them low for the residential customer, and that was beneficial. What we've heard today is some of our neighboring communities are raising their water rates up to 25% to the south of us. And we've had small increments in our water rates. And one thing I had a question going back to capacity fee. If I'm a home developer with single family lots, and as I develop my development residential, is the capacity fee going to be like $9,500 per lot as capacity?
Mayor Council, the combined capacity fee with the water fee and the wastewater fee would be just over $9,500 for a residential lot.
Okay, all right. Council, direction? We good for, I like Mr. Smith's recommendation on his, on chart 26. Jim, you want to review that again?
So that is, if you on page 26, you'll see by giving the notice on the higher amount, in the future, you might decide not to, even though assuming the council adopts the capacity fee, not to make those reductions in the, that are in the right column. And then that'll maybe give you a little flexibility on the residential side. And you're basically closing that inequity, that gap, a little bit, just fractionally faster.
So I have a question on that then. We had talked about them coming back to the council over the next week with some higher numbers on that landscaping commercial rate. And your point is that maybe we wouldn't have to go higher, we just wouldn't go lower if we were to have the capacity fee added. So
I think,
are you?
Yeah, I think on the landscaping fee, they weren't reducing it. See that, so I think the idea is that staff's going to have another number for landscaping, and you're going to see a slightly higher number on the landscaping when we do the notice of intent to give
Okay.
us some flexibility.
Okay, so both. So we would have a higher number from staff, but that we have that gap in
And
there
it'll
to
be built
work
in,
with.
and so staff's just going to do that, and they'll come up with a slightly higher number, and when you come back on the 22nd, you're going to see a number for landscaping. I suspect that's a little bit higher than that, just for flexibility purposes in the
Okay.
future.
Mr. Redio?
Mr. Smith, is there, I don't remember, is there language on the notice of intent that says these are maximum rates, they're not the end rates that are approved, or something like, to that effect?
I don't know, I don't remember, I've looked at it, but not for a long time. I don't know if Brian knows the exact language of it, but we can include
Maybe
language,
we
we can
can-
include language like that.
Maybe including some language that, it says, these are maximum notice of rates, but it could change, or something to that effect, wordsmith that, those kinds of pieces, so that there's some clarity that these are not potentially the rates final numbers that will go into effect, right? Because
Yeah,
that's some info there.
we can add language like that.
Okay, perfectly.
Okay, very good. I'm going to take a shot here, but I think I anticipate the capacity fee moving forward for our community. I think that's great for all users within our city, and as Mr. Butler said, growth needs to pay for growth. With that, council, if there's nothing else, we could move forward and take maybe a 5-minute. Yeah, maybe need a 5-minute before we. Okay. Jan is patiently set back there. Oh, do I have electric here?
There's like 30 slides.
Too late, you promised a break.
All right. We'll reset here in 5 minutes.
There's like so many slides left.
Well, wait, how did I miss that?
It just, they combine.
Well, we have Mr. Summers in the room, but, why don't we start? He's here. Mr. Boucher and your team, Tony, John.
Good morning, Mayor Freeman, council members. I'm Scott Boucher. I'm the Energy Resources. Is it on? Okay. Energy Resources Director. I'm joined today by Tony Knorn, who's our Energy Resources Program Manager, and John Petroff, who's our Senior Fiscal Analyst. First, we're going to talk about two utilities today, the electric utility and the natural gas utility. We'll start with the electric utility, and I will turn it over to Mr. Petroff.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. We're going to discuss some of the increasing cost pressures on the electric utility. Similar to water, on the operating budget, we have some inflated costs on outside vendor services, such as tree trimming, and then personal service increases due to merit raises and our salary parity with SRP, that program. We see personal service increases due to that. On the debt service side, we're meeting growing demands in the downtown for new services, and we have some reliability projects along with AMI costs increases there. And then graphically, what I just mentioned on the operating side, you see those increases over time. And as far as priority projects on the debt, adding to that, those debt service costs, reliability projects for Kelwood Substation and the 69 kV looping, and then we have some coordinated projects at Stapleton University with transportation and water. Moving on, we discussed the debt service increases. You see those here numerically, and slight dip in 24-25, but that was just due to some fund balance, extra fund balance there, but the costs are continuing to go up.
This is a graph of our electric supply cost for an average customer, comparing if they were in SRP's territory versus our territory. Prior to 21-22, our customers had a significant advantage in electric supply cost. But with the market's disruptions, in 2021, we saw a drastic increase. We were able to control those increases through ARPA funding, and that's the hatched line you'll see. So the actual cost that our customers experience is at the bottom of that hatched line. SRP has increased their rates over the past few years, and we've sought to hold our rates steady. And as a result, last year in 24-25, for the first time, we saw our costs actually less than SRP. And at the beginning of this year in 25-26, that's holding as well. So we're pleased to present that to you.
We compare ourselves to neighboring utilities throughout the year. Our two neighboring utilities, SRP and APS. In November of this year, SRP is coming with another increase. Overall, it's a 2.4% price increase, and their average user will experience a $5.61 increase. They're also shifting to a tiered service charge, so they're going to have a multifamily charge of $20, which is their current service charge for all their residential customers. And then single family will go up to $30 a month. And then their really high users at the 3% will be at $40 a month. And then APS, their rate case will be effective June of 2026, and their average bill impact will be $20 a month. As far as residential electric bill comparison, so we have what are 3 levels of usage: a small customer usage, an average usage customer, and then our large usage residential customers. You can see in the blue, that's what our current rates would be if we didn't have any rate increases. And then the checkerboard blue is what our proposed rates would increase to. But you can see through the 3 different levels of usage, we compare pretty well with SRP. And we did take the SRP bills in the orange. That's for a multifamily. And then their checkerboard adds that extra $10 for the single family, so you can get those comparisons. So last time we came to you last year to talk about rates, we said what a prior forecast would be. So this top line here was what we said we anticipate our customers would pay for last fiscal year. And these are based on the last fiscal year usage. So for the average customer who came to you and said they would expect a bill of $153.55 a month. Now, what Tony talked about with the consumption costs, the commodity costs going down, what our customers actually paid, even with those increases we had on average, was $146.18 a month. And then what we're proposing with further reductions in our commodity costs, which are a pass-through to the customer, we're forecasting customer bills to go down to $137.98 on average. So we're seeing reductions on those commodity sides to the benefit of our customers.
Well, I think that's good news, right, Tony? Yes, sir. Scott, John?
So what we're proposing, again, we looked at the forecast. We are seeing those rising debt costs, but compared to last year's forecast, they have gone down a little bit, but they're still increasing. So we looked at that, and what we proposed last year was a $3 service charge increase. We've changed that now to the $1 a month increase, and then we've left the tier usages the same. Summer tier 1 at 2%, tier 2 at 4%, winter tier 1 at 5%, and that winter tier 2 at 36%. Now that looks like a large number. This is the final year we're doing that to where we can get to an inclining rate in tier 2. So the more you use, the more strain you put on the system. We're going to have that inclining rate now in the winter tier 2. And so overall, on an average bill, these proposed changes would increase a customer's bill $2.27 or 1.7%. On the commercial side, we compare ourselves here with SRP across the 3 levels of usage, pretty comparable with those lower commodity costs I discussed. But all 3 levels of usage, we compare pretty favorably with SRP. And so as far as proposed commercial electric rates, we're proposing a $5 system service charge on all commercial customers. And then tier 2, summer, a 5% increase, in tier 2 winter, a 3%. Now, tier 2 is customers that use between 15,000 to 75,000 kilowatt hours. So those tier charges won't affect the majority of our commercial customers. So the average customer would just see that $5 increase a month or less than 1%.
If there's no questions, we can move on to the natural gas utility. Okay.
On the slide 41, you said this is the last year that we can, I don't know how you said it.
Yeah.
So then what happens next year?
So I think we'll see it on the forecast, but it'll drop down to a lower percentage. We're still probably recommend an increase on that tier 2, but we've now achieved where our tier 2 rate will be higher than the tier 1 winter. And we've done that over a 3-year period, and so this is the final year of that.
I've lost
Increase.
track of all my charts that are in here and that aren't in here, but so there is a chart that shows future.
Yeah, it should be on the forecast chart
Yeah, it's on the
that we
forecast.
see.
Okay, thanks.
Tony, can you give us a snapshot of how we buy our power, whether it's, renewables, PPAs, how that's done, hydro with the other commodities, and just quickly give us an overview.
Mayor, Council, we've had a long-standing relationship with the Western Area Power Administration, which delivers about 20% of our resources through hydropower projects. That's broken up. About 15% is the Parker Davis project, so the dams on Lake Havasu and Lake Mojave. Then the remaining 5% are through the Colorado River Storage Project, which is mostly Glen Canyon Dam. So 20% is hydropower split up between those projects. Beginning in January 1st of this year, we started our first power purchase from SRP for probably a decade or two. So that is a resource which will cover about 15 or 16% of our portfolio. And that's accompanied with renewable energy credits. So if you stack those two on top of each other, we're looking at around 35 or 36% of our portfolio being renewable. Then in addition to that, we're closing in, I think, with these new solar projects that are coming online, that'll be 3.6 megawatts of solar in the downtown that's providing power directly to the grid. And that's a few percentage points as well. And we have, I think, close to 2.5 megawatts of customer-owned solar now. So if you roll that all together, we're looking in the upper 30s in terms of renewable resources this calendar year, let's say. And then the remainder is split between 4 or 5, I can't recall how many exactly, contracts with energy marketers. And that's just purchases through the wholesale energy market between Constellation Energy Commodities Group, AKA Exelon, Brookfield Renewables, BP, and other vendors like that. And so we set up those 4 or 5 contracts so that they're never ending on the same. We're trying not to end a lot of them on the same time so that we don't have a lot of market exposure. We're trying to contract for longer terms to keep prices stable. And then, so that's today. And then right now we're still in negotiations for the Pinal Solar Project with the Arizona Electric Power Cooperative, which will be 25 megawatts of solar and 20 megawatts of battery storage. And that should cover a significant portion of our energy to where I think within 1 or 2 years, Mesa will be above 50% in terms of renewable energy resources.
Okay, good. How many megawatts does the utility use per year?
Yeah, our peak is very close to 90 megawatts. I don't have the average across the year, but it does run as low as in the 20s during the shoulder hours, shoulder months,
Good.
April.
Thanks for that overview.
Sure.
All right, let's move over to,
Natural gas.
yeah.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Petroff.
So similar to electric, we're seeing those increasing costs on the operating budget, inflation on services and contracts, personal service increases with merit raises. We have added new staff due to some of the growth in Magma and also adding staff for the fiber to the premise project. increase, so here's graphically the increasing costs on the gas utility on the operating side. And then some of our big projects, so for the debt service increases, Arizona Farms, that's a, what is it? Compliance project, sorry. Gansell Road, gas main, the Clausen Gate, and then a couple of coordinated projects with other city departments. And then here you see those increasing debt service costs over time. There's a few dips. The first dip in 24-25's timing issue on bond sales, and then the dip in 28-29 is when we have some taxable bonds that are being paid off, and then those drop off, and then you still see those increases.
Go back to the slide prior. Gansell Road, $23 million. Remind us what that is. Is that the battery? Sure.
No, so that's a project that we've had in our master plan for a very long time. One of the sort of operating principles that we use with our gas system is we want to be able to lose a gate station and still be able to operate the gas system, because taking out 20,000 or 30,000 gas customers is just unfeasible. So we recently added a new gate station in the north side of the Magma system. We have one in the center of it, and then we've had Clausen Gate, which is the oldest gate in the far southeast. And so with the addition of the third gate station, that does give us that redundancy between gates, but the ability to move gas between the gate stations wasn't there. So this the Gansell Road project will allow full redundancy for gate stations once it's done, in that we could lose our Gansell Gate, we could lose our new Sherwood Gate, and the other two gate stations would be able to supply the system. So it really is a risk mitigation strategy, but it's also to your point, to be able to move gas to the northern side of the system and serve those industrial customers. But this was conceived way before we even began talking to those customers.
Okay. Oh, yeah, definitely. All right, thanks for that.
Okay, so again, we compare ourselves to our neighboring utilities that serve City of Mesa residents. So Southwest Gas proposed a rate increase in March of 2025, approximately 8.9%, and that would have raised customers' bills about $3.75 a month.
This is a similar graph to our electric graph, where we're showing the cost to purchase the natural gas commodity and get it to our gate stations. We've always enjoyed a pretty significant advantage over Southwest Gas until Winter Storm Uri in February 2021. Because of that event, we spent the next 2 years recovering costs there kind of slowly, rather than hitting our customers with it all at once. And so you can see beginning in 23-24, we're back below Southwest Gas. During that period, we also began our asset management agreement, where our supplier pays us for the pipeline capacity that we don't use, and that's helped save some money for customers as well.
So our comparison to Southwest Gas with our current rate or bills and our proposed bills, you can see on the average customer, or the small customer, sorry, we're a little bit above them due to how we structure our rates with the service charge versus their service charge. And then moving on to the average customer, we're about $1.05 on the proposed rates above Southwest Gas. And then for the large customers, we are seeing a little bit more favorability for the City of Mesa at about $5.27 less for the proposed rates. So with that, when we looked at the comparability with the larger customer being a little bit more favorable, we changed what we were recommending from the prior forecast and taking the service charge from $1 to $0, and then we're leaving the summer percents the same on the tiers at 7 and 15, and then the winter tier 1 at 7%. But we're increasing that tier 2 winter usage charge 24% to bring those larger users more comparable to Southwest Gas. So overall, for our average customer, we've reduced from a $2.07 increase per month to $1.43 increase per month. On the commercial side, we're seeing comparability in the small and average customer. Those large customers, Southwest Gas has a different rate structure for their large customer compared to what they charge their small and average commercial customers. So you see that quite a bit below what City of Mesa is currently proposing. Last year at this time, what Tony mentioned, gas, you can see on that graph, gas costs are coming down for us and Southwest Gas. So their larger users are seeing more of a benefit, which is affecting that large customer. So our proposed commercial rates, we're keeping them the same as you saw last year, a $3 increase to the system service charge and 3% on the summer and winter tier 1, 5% on the summer and winter tier 2. So an average commercial customer would see an $11.72 increase per month or 2.3%.
And that is the end of our presentation. I believe, yeah, it goes to solid waste after this, so.
How many large customers do we have in our system, roughly?
On the Mayor, on the gas system?
On the gas side, yeah.
So I guess.
Or what do you consider a large customer? Because you have your residential usage, and then we flip over to large or commercial.
So.
You can say.
Maybe while John looks a little bit. Go ahead.
Sorry, we have about 2,300 commercial customers, general commercial customers. So I guess on a large customer, these are like quartiles, so it'd be about 570 customers we would consider large. That would fall into that last column graph you saw.
But we do have another rate on top of this rate, which is specifically for very large users. So a few of our larger industrial customers, they have substantial enough usage that they kind of fall out of what you're looking at here and they go on to a specific large customer rate. And I think we have 2 customers on that right now.
Is the gas pipeline at capacity now with what we're delivering today? And we're looking at utilizing the Transamerican, is that right, in the future?
Yeah, so the current line that we have capacity on is at capacity. And there is a planned project that we're hoping to participate in with Transwestern.
Transwestern, okay.
And that was something that council approved on Monday.
Right.
That we had going forward, that we're negotiating and we're working with Arizona Electric Power Cooperative again on that project.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's talk about solid waste now.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Joe Giudice, Deputy Solid Waste Director, here on behalf of Director Collins and our amazing Solid Waste Department. Out of respect for your time, I'm going to go through this quickly, but certainly if you have questions or if you need me to slow down on anything, I'm happy to do so. So real quick, this chart shows our operating expenses for the solid waste utility. And the main cost drivers for us are our amazing people that are out there doing the work every day. It is our trucks, our fleet of trucks who are very logistics driven, our bins and barrels, so those are our commodities. And then our landfill disposal costs and our recycling processing fees are the main cost drivers for us. And we had some savings last year, which I'll quickly show you on this slide. The recycling markets were stronger last year, and the way our contracts are structured, we receive a good portion of the revenue from commodity sales. So although we budget for expenses equivalent to what it costs to dispose of the material, because the recycling markets were strong last year, we actually had like $500,000 in lower expenses thanks to those recycling markets. But just quickly pointing out, you can see that in June and July of this year, those net, we're now back to paying some processing fees, so the markets are shifting. Now moving into our rate increase proposals for our residential, this aligns with what was in the forecast, which was a 5.5% proposed increase. Our typical customer has a 90-gallon trash barrel and recycle barrel. So that's a $1.82 increase per month for that customer, bringing their new rate to $34.99 based on this proposal. We also have an amazing bulk item program here at the City of Mesa. It's unique and different from how many of the other cities operate theirs, but I think ours is really the best and the model that others wish they could copy. In our program, residents will contact us to schedule a pickup in their community, and we charge a fee of $29 currently. We're proposing a $2 increase to that fee just to cover the cost increases that we've experienced on personnel and landfill costs, bringing that new fee to $31. A quick reminder, we have supplementals so people can bring things to the landfill directly if they have bulk item. They can also use our community cleanup program, which is a new program we implemented last year. And we have our neighborhood cleanup program as well. So there's multiple ways which our residents can remove of their bulk items. Now I'm going to shift over to talk about our commercial services. So for solid waste, commercial is very different than for water and for the gas utilities. We are in a competitive open market in how we're doing our services. So any customer that's a commercial customer in Mesa, they can choose to use our services or they could choose to use a competitor's services. We are also recommending a 5.5% rate increase for our commercial customers. We have two programs. We have our front load bin program, which you see the blue bin here, and we also have a roll-off program. So for our commercial, the 5.5% increase is spread over a couple quick ways. There's a base rate. So for a 6-yard trash bin, that's a little over a $5 increase for that customer. We also have an out-of-zone fee. The reason we have that is we want to be very efficient in our services, and so we set the city up into zones. But sometimes we have customers who need us to service them on days that we're not in their zone. And we will do that, but we will charge the additional fee for the cost of getting out to that customer. And then we are proceeding with a 3-year process of discontinuing a discount that we were offering for multi-day service. There just really isn't any true savings for multi-day service, so we're removing that discount. For our roll-off customers, so these are the larger boxes that might be, maybe a resident might select this if they're doing a renovation at their home, or we certainly have commercial customers as well that have these larger boxes that we service. We're also recommending a 5.5% overall rate increase, and it's broken up into two pieces. It is, we charge a rate per ton of material collected, so we're increasing that to reflect those increasing landfill costs, bringing the new rate to $51.50 for trash and $59.82 for a green waste only customer. And then we have a haul fee that's also associated with that, and just a nominal increase for our smaller roll-off boxes of 15, 20, and 30 yards of $5, bringing that to $140 and $150 respectively. And then for our larger 40-yard roll-off, that would be a $6 increase, bringing that to $166. And then below just shows what that impact would be to a typical one-time customer. And this is my final slide, and it just summarizes everything together for you to see. But I did want to answer a question more typically asked before I take questions, which is, are our commercial rates competitive, and what do we do to ensure they're competitive? So we do a couple of different things. First, we'll go out to the market and we'll find customers that have moved over to our services, and we'll inquire with them about why. Oftentimes it's fees and costs. And we also will do a survey of what other customers are paying based on, so we know we're competitive in that regard. And then the other check for us is after we do a rate increase, like last year, Mayor and Council approved a 10% rate increase on commercial customers. We monitor how do our customers behave or respond to those changes. And we have this essentially the same slight growth in customers from last year, which was the pattern we expected. So those are kind of how we check our commercial rates and make sure we're market competitive. And with that, I will see if there's any questions.
No, but I have a cough.
You do have a cough.
I think it'd go away after a
You've
month.
had that
but-
for a while, yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Spilsbury.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. So I heard you mention employee costs and landfill costs. Like, what are the driving factors of any of these price increases? Are those the two main ones, or are there other ones?
Yeah, it's, so landfill cost is one of our big driving costs. And so for us, we have 3 or 4 different contracted vendors. Their costs, we had new contracts we had to put in place this last year, and we had cost increases with one as low as 5% and with the others as high as 60%.
Oh, wow.
So those are reflected in here. And that's just really, in our market, it's, as landfills come to close, we're gonna see reduced capacity, and so we have to be planning for that as a utility to make sure we're prepared for the future.
Okay, so that's, if people ask, that's going to be the main one right there. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, Vice Mayor?
One of the major cost factors that I've seen is the cost of maintenance of our vehicles and replacement of our vehicles. And it was probably about a month or so ago, I think we saw a significant increase requested for maintenance and parts because of where they come from. So what are we doing to try to get ourselves ahead of that and reduce those costs? Because our legacy vehicles are clearly starting to fall apart, and we need some new ones. So are we coming up with a plan to try to reduce those costs? It seems like a low-hanging fruit, possibly.
Yeah, Mayor, Vice Mayor, thanks for the question. On the great news front, since last year when we had this conversation with you, we have been able to put about 28 to 30 new vehicles into service. So a quick reminder that I know COVID was 5 years ago, but it caused such disruptions in the vehicle manufacturing sector. It really impacted us. We were 3 years away from when we ordered a truck to when we actually received it, and had major cost increases associated with those. So we've taken delivery of those. That's going to help our reliability. It's going to help with keeping our maintenance costs under control, because we were seeing significant increased maintenance costs. The reality is, though, also the cost of labor, the cost of parts, those have gone up quite a bit in that industry, and they remain pretty high at this point.
And I think you mentioned in the meeting protecting those vehicles from lithium-ion battery fires that can destroy them. We've seen that in our city and several others. What are we doing to add some technologies to protect the vehicles from burning up?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, the couple of different things. The fleet department, first off, has done an amazing job of helping us review our trucks and see what we can do to help design them in such a way to help reduce the likelihood of that. But with respect to lithium-ion battery fires in particular, that's a definite challenge. We're working cooperatively across all the cities and the cities and fire departments. So solid waste and fire departments are working together across the valley to really promote to our residents about proper disposal. We really want people to bring those or deliver those to our household hazardous materials facility for proper handling.
Excellent. What does a garbage truck cost?
Well, the most recent cost, Vice Mayor, are about $600,000.
Okay. So every time we dispose of something improperly and it causes a fire, it's $600,000 to our ratepayers. So that's just something I want to bring up repeatedly as part of this message, that we have to dispose of these things. There's things that every day people can do to protect our assets and positively impact our rates over time. So thank you for looking at that.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, thank you. I think we're going to need to use you for some of our advertising.
I am available for a small fee.
And Joe, what's the build time for a truck now?
Actually, we're back down to 12 to 16 months. So that's kind of back to the schedule that used to exist.
Unfortunately, though, Mayor, the cost did not come down to pre-COVID costs. So the speed may be back, but the cost is not. So, and this is a industry-wide issue. I was with some fellow city managers just a few days ago, and they were lamenting the fact that this is one of their biggest issues as well on the solid waste side is just trying to keep their vehicles in operation. And as Joe alluded to, those new vehicles will help tremendously, but there are the cost pressures, unfortunately, with the costs of what those vehicles are running for now.
Good. And these are still natural gas driven?
Yes.
Compressed gas, okay.
Yes.
Well, one of the things we've challenged you in the past is make sure we're competitive on the commercial side. We don't want to lose our rates on the commercial. I know we've challenged you to do that and stay competitive, to make sure our cost recovery reflects our delivery of services, especially as labor and trucks are expensive, and hopefully we don't have too many fires.
Fires are bad.
Yes, but we've seen our garbage trucks within our metro area catch fire because of lithium batteries. All right, Brian, you going to finish up with the last 3 slides?
Yes, Mayor, Council, just a couple more slides. This is mentioned, I just wanted to wrap up. So the first slide is the 25-26 recommended adjustment rates if we moved forward without the capacity fee, and just wanted to kind of recap that. The top 2 that I highlighted was the water residential tier 1 and then water commercial down below, and how those are 4s and 14% respectively. And we still have a good net sources and uses. And then on the next slide is with the recommended rate adjustments with a capacity fee. I want to kind of then show the full forecast with that. And as you notice, those top 2 lines again, instead of 4, now it's 3.5% for the tier 1 as we were able to lower that. And then also the water is, instead of 14, it's at 13%. So this is what I was mentioning, to where this forecast shows where we would move the construction of those growth projects off of this forecast. And so we're able to reduce the rates adjustments, so those rate adjustments would not have to pay for those growth, because if the capacity fee does get adopted by council, that fee revenue would then pay for those projects. So it's growth paying for growth, and then also it helps alleviate the impact of our current customers on having to pay for that growth. So that's where this forecast is. And then on the next slide we have is just a comparison of this current fiscal year of the budget, and then 25-26 projected with no capacity fee, and 25-26 with capacity fee, and just kind of showing that comparison. And with that, that is the end of our.
Well, I think it's prudent to note, going back to the 65, slide 65, if we do it with the capacity fee, we're drawing down our reserves almost $29 million. So we are reinvesting into all of our departments. So we understand we have a strong reserve. We're capable of using those monies to help offset the percentage of our increases that we have to do. So, and then also meet our debt responsibilities, for our utility debt. So I think this is a good program here and what we're doing. So.
And Mayor and Council, I will come back. We will take your recommendations and your comments and update this with some of the discussion that we've had about the landscaping, and also adjusting the tiers themselves on the rates. So then we'll come back in a little over a week and show that.
Yeah, so we'll send that out to you next Thursday, so that that will help frame the discussion then for the 22nd, so that we can have that at the study session at the council meeting that evening as well. But we'll summarize those changes, and there'll be some offline conversations, obviously, over the next week as we work to refine that.
Probably couldn't come fast enough. September, November, December, and then January for effective date. Okay. Council, if there's nothing else, we'll excuse these gentlemen and thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next is item 2C, the presentation on 2026 employee benefits.
And we appreciate Jan's patience on this. And the reason why we can't push this is we have open enrollment coming up shortly.
Yeah.
So we had to share this with you today. And I know they'll go as quickly as they can, but still share the information that's important for you and the rest of our employees.
I know I missed my flex spending date, so I got to get back in that.
I missed my
wife is
dentist
shooting
appointment.
me. All right, Terry and Jan.
Mayor, council members. Terry Overby, HR Director. I have Jan Ashley here with me, who is our Employee Benefits Administrator. She is going to briefly go over some updates to our 2026 employee benefits and our wellness programs.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and discuss our benefit programs for 2026. As you can see from the first slide, we're continuing with our very well-reputed and contracted vendor partners for the various programs under our medical, dental, vision, employee assistance programs, health and dependent care spending, business travel accident, commuter travel accident, and some new vendor relationships with regard to the standard coming in on life and accidental death and dismemberment insurance for our employees and their family members. And then short-term disability insurance is also included in that new vendor relationship, along with the long-term disability insurance for sworn officers and elected officials. Our Health and Wellness Centre is proceeding wonderfully under pace with our relatively new vendor there, Premise Health. So we're really looking forward to that all continuing in 2026. There are a number of drivers that stand behind what the employee benefit programs are projected to be and what we offer to employees and retirees in 2026 and beyond. We strive to find a balance between the financial considerations that you see up here on the screen right now and employee engagement opportunities to support recruitment, retention, and satisfaction goals. The financial considerations are all about sustainability in the face of some very external, national, and local pressures like healthcare cost inflation is a number one. This is particularly evident in healthcare system cost inflation increases and specialist services in the marketplace. It's also particularly evident in the high cost of prescription drugs in both the specialty and the non-specialty drug channels, all heavily impacted by consumer demand generated from multi-source advertising and knowledge sources, and a pipeline of new market entries that compound every year. In the employee engagement side of the equation, or the drivers from that perspective, it's the heart of the city's culture that drives our services to residents and businesses and visitors to Mesa. It's important to employees to deliver benefit programs that focus on free, accessible primary and preventive care services for employees, retirees, and their respective family members. That is most important with regard to our wonderful state-of-the-art Health and Wellness Centre that has just recently moved here to the downtown Mesa area. Employees are also heavily involved in and appreciative of incentivized wellness programs, lowest possible rate increases in the premium deductions that come out of paychecks, high coverage plan designs, quality networks and access, manageable out-of-pocket expenses, and then life insurance coverage elements that provide family and asset protection, and sustainable lifetime retiree healthcare coverage. So those are all the drivers that are underlying what we're projecting and planning for the future.
Jan, can I stop you there?
Yes.
For Mr. Butler, go back this slide before. Lifetime retiree health plan access and funding. What's going to, for sworn officers like that, are we going to have future conversation on that?
We already had the conversation.
Okay, I'm behind.
A year ago. So we introduced that in 2023, going into 2024, that we've now allowed access to our retiree programs for those employees who were hired after 2009, who previously only had access and no funding opportunity. So that is all in place with a 20-year minimum service requirement going forward.
Yeah, Mayor, so to clarify, no change. We did reopen the lifetime medical opportunity a couple of years ago, as Jen alluded to, and so we're not changing that. So
okay.
I want to be crystal clear with any of our employees listening. Nothing's changing.
Yes, in that regard.
Thank you.
So this slide is the what's not changing in our medical plans in 2026. We will still retain comprehensive high-value coverage with 3 plan options. We will have the same administrators and networks, the same comprehensive coverage as I just mentioned. What was already 100% covered in the plans will remain 100% covered in the plans. And all of the co-insurance amounts at 50% or 80% will also be retained in each of the plans as they stand today. Wellness programs will have $1,000 per household reward opportunities as it is today. That will continue in 2026. And the Employee Health and Wellness Center will retain its current standing of providing primary and preventive care services free of charge for the employees and their covered family members in our medical plans. So what is changing in 2026 is premium rates, number one. And I'll get to the details on that in a later slide. We're also recommending some plan design changes to change the way that members experience their out-of-pocket expenses when they're actually utilizing services. So some of those areas of out-of-pocket expenses are intended to increase next year. So there'll be more impact on an employee's out-of-pocket expense than there is necessarily today. The goal is to reduce some of these plan expenses when members are utilizing the benefits by shifting the costs a little bit towards them in the forms of deductible increases, out-of-pocket maximum increases, meaning the point at which the plan would take over at 100% is now a little bit further removed than it is today, and copay increases for those plans that have copays installed as the main method of out-of-pocket expense, copay increases for each of those types of items. Interestingly, or importantly to recognize, is even though those out-of-pocket expenses are increasing for our utilizing members, members will still have the opportunity to defer or put away monies for reimbursement in their flexible spending account plan that would help them pay for those out-of-pocket expenses on a before-tax basis, which is a very valuable benefit for employees to continue to have. Prescription drug plan design changes are also recommended because that is the one area that is perhaps the biggest driver of cost increases that are happening year over year. We're recommending that we go to a one plan design for all so that a member doesn't have to make a choice between which plan they're in based upon what their prescription drug coverage needs might be. They know that they get that same prescription drug coverage in each of the three plans that we have available, and they don't have to make the choice between those three plans. But the recommendations are that we increase, there'll be no increase on deductibles, which are currently zero on the RX, the prescription drug side of the equation, so that stays standard. But we will be increasing minimums, maximums, and co-insurance amounts by the channel and tier of coverage. So the channels are retail 30-day supply, retail 90-day supply, and mail order, which is also up to the 90-day supply. And then the other big channel is specialty drugs. So we're recommending that there be increases in those minimums, maximums, and potentially the co-insurance levels by channel and by tier. And the tiers are based upon generic, preferred brand, and non-preferred brand within the respective classifications of drug. Overall, there will also be an increase in the out-of-pocket maximums on the prescription drug side. That was at the end of the preceding slide. It would now go to $4,000 per person or $8,000 per family, meaning that's the point at which, beyond which the plan is bearing the full cost of the prescription drug, but the member is still incurring their co-payment amounts, et cetera, up until those $4,000 to $8,000 level. I mentioned earlier that we're recommending medical plan increases as a necessity in today's current environment. Healthcare premium increases on a national level, they'll be significant for millions of people in the United States next year. The city's planning for approximately a 10% increase across medical plans in place today for both active and retiree employees. The increased percentage is lower than might otherwise have been called for by us increasing those out-of-pocket expenses that we've just talked about relative to when people are utilizing the plans. So between those two features, we hope to be able to bring the underlying cost factors into a more sustainable projected forward for the future scenario. The range of increases that are speculated or recommended for employees, active employees, is a range from $9 a month increase to $73 a month increase, depending upon which plan they have and which tier of coverage. So the $73 happens to be for the family coverage in our richest plan design, which is the copay plan. And that's the amount of increase that's recommended. These are monthly numbers, which you see on the next slide. We've itemized it out for each of the plans so that you can see at a glance that 9 to 73, and that's how it's broken down plan by plan. Other benefit plan changes, we'll just skim through this as quickly as possible, but lots of good news on this horizon relative to employee satisfaction and also cost amounts, et cetera. So the flexible spending accounts will have increases in their maximums that are in accordance with compliance, federal IRS rules and regulations. A biggie to note there is the dependent care for childcare and elder care expenses. That has been increased significantly. It allows employees to put that amount away at a $7,500 level or a $3,750 level per year. And that hasn't changed since 1986. So that is really a long time in the making. And as a result of recent legislative changes, that's allowable. Our vision care plans will continue as they are today with the 3 plan designs that we have in place. We do have just some very small rate increases on the 2 richer plan designs because we haven't had any increases in quite a long time, and then secondarily because those popular plan designs have been very heavily utilized in recent times, so that brings it a little bit more into balance. Voluntary life insurance and short-term disability insurance, as I mentioned earlier, is our new vendor, is going to be the Standard Life Insurance Company, headquartered in Portland, Oregon. Standard is a company that we used to have in place many, many years ago, and they came back into the mix relative to these particular benefit products with a recent, very competitive RFP process. We're able to offer employees and the city a couple of really good things. Number one, increases in coverage levels. So increases in the maximum amount that people are able to choose for their voluntary life insurance coverage that's more in line with what their needs are. And then we've had some decreases in the actual cost of that coverage or a maintenance of the cost of that coverage. So that's a really good place to be going forward. Same situation on the short-term disability insurance, same 3 plan designs, but with reduced unit prices. And since that's coming out of employees' paychecks, that's a particularly important factor for us to come to. Annual wellness program, as we've mentioned before, is very much a big part of employee satisfaction, and the incentivizing of people to participate in that program is very well received by a large number of our employees. And we will continue that up to $1,000 per household in incentives and rewards. And that's a combination of cash rewards and also a credit towards one's future premium costs in the following year on the medical plan. The Health and Wellness Center continues to be a crown in our presentation to employees. We provide all services free of charge, skilled, high quality, very well reputed and dedicated medical providers and staff. Other services are available at that facility as well, and it's available to all of our health plan members, whether they be employees, retirees, or the respective family members that are covered in our medical programs. And then last but not least is open enrollment. It starts in a very few days. It's almost less than half a month. Starts on October 1st, a little bit sooner than we've done in recent years based upon scheduling needs that we had. So it's October 1st to October 15th. We will have the enrollment capability in our eBen Mesa very proprietary and exclusive eligibility and enrollment system. All of the information, all the open enrollment guides, plan document, all of that information will actually go live first part of next week and be available for employees to take a look at in the system. It is a passive enrollment, as it has been in years past, except for the flexible spending accounts, which it does require an enrollment or a re-enrollment. That's an IRS requirement, so we honour that respectively. And then anything that anyone wants to change, any changes in dependent status or classification, change in their particular program or plan option that they're in today, and of course all of the new voluntary life options that will be out there for people to increase their coverage amounts or get coverage amounts for the first time if indeed they haven't had that protection in place before. The Wellness and Benefits Fair is at the Mesa Convention Center on October 2nd from 8 to 1. We strongly advise everybody to come. It will be absolutely a to die for occasion, so to speak. I probably should have said that, but no.
Puns are my job.
Okay. We'll have our enrollment computer lab available there with volunteers to assist to actually doing your enrollment right there and then. Free flu shots, body composition testing, all of the benefit plan vendors, including the new ones, city departments, the whole works will be there. It was a great event last year. Each year it gets better and better, and so we fully intend for it to be that way this year as well. So with that being said, and I know I've spoken fast and furious, any questions?
It's all at the convention center?
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah, on October 2nd. Yep.
Mayor, seems like it's a short window. I mean, October 1st through the 15th.
Yep.
So every employee, if you choose not to change anything, Jan, what are our options?
You don't have to do anything except be informed, and we'll automatically roll over your current elections to next year, and it'll come through with the new rates if there's any new rates that might be applicable. And go from there.
Absolutely.
Mr. Butler?
Yeah, I just really appreciate Jan and her work on this. Obviously, we all know that if anything's been increasing nationally, it's medical cost. And so she's been able to balance that with trying to minimize the impact on our employees and our retirees, but still being, responsible to our trust and to making sure that we are being good fiscal stewards of this. But, truly this is one of the things that sets us apart as an employer and makes us an employer of choice in the region is what we do from the health and wellness side for our employees and their families. So I appreciate their work, and I think we have another great plan year where we have some great benefits for our employees.
Well, I have to agree. I'm probably one of the most tenured employees in Mesa with 45 years of using our health benefits. So, gosh, did I say that word? But I can see the progression that we've had in our health benefits for recruitment and retention in our city. And I think this is so great. I mean, to have our own wellness center, envy of most cities. And you can call up and get things done very timely, as well as have your family and others. Council, do you want to weigh in, Julie, or anything?
I was just commenting that I don't even think Frankie's 45.
Oh, sorry. Come on, tell me you're 46.
I'm only 47, so.
Well, with that, we have, again, good wellness and benefits in our city, so I appreciate that. With that, that's our last item, Council. Unless there's something else, Terry and Jan, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we'll have knowledge of receipt of minutes, which are the Historic Preservation Board and the Economic Development Advisory Board meetings. Is there a motion to accept those? Ms. Spilsbury, Mr. Reddy, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Next is current events and conferences attended. Council, do you have anything you wish to share? Ms.
I just
Spilsbury.
really quick I'm wearing purple today in solidarity with our Mesa Public Schools. The high schools all wore purple today for solidarity with the Suicide Awareness Prevention Month. We've had some suicides in our district, and bringing more attention to that is always a good thing, and being aware of what's going on around us. And then I just wanted to do one more plug for our 9/11 Day of Service on Saturday. Please find an hour of your day to look up a service project either at the city website or justserve.org, and you can find something that you'll be able to serve. And I think especially right now, that would make all of us feel a lot better to go do something good in our community.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up I know not a lot of people are listening, but 3 suicides, at least 2 successful. 1 was not, but that young lady's in ICU. I have been in contact with our school superintendent to see what the city can do and offer resources for suicide prevention. With that, anything else, Council? I'll just share with you, I spoke at Wyland. They are a conservation group about water at the Kerr Center for Ag Science this past week with the Toro Corporation. And the City Mesa received some great gifts as well as from Wyland. And the kids really there loved the presentation of these specialized glasses that you can look at screens and not get the glare from them. Spoke at the Arizona Small Business Association Roadshow at the Convention Center as well. Small business owners were here in Mesa, Arizona at our Convention Center, number A. Then had a great lunch yesterday with the Rotary and spoke with the Rotary here at the Small Business Builder Program. With that, Mr. Butler, can you share future meetings after this
Mr.
one?
Mayor, Council, thanks for hanging with us this morning. I know this was long, but it's such an important discussion, so thank you for that. Next week, I wish I could promise you shorter, but we are going to have our strategic planning session next Thursday morning in place of our regular study session, and that's going to be held at our new Northeast Public Safety Training, can't say training facility, our new Northeast Public Safety Facility. I'm all tongue twisted right now on this, but we'll be utilizing the community room at that facility for our strategic planning session. We'll be back here on Monday the 22nd for study session, then council meeting that evening. But because I lost a bet to Councilmember Summers about how long we would go this morning, we're going to cancel the Thursday, September 25th study session. No, just kidding. We were.
That's my birthday, so I was expecting a big, huge party that morning.
In honor of your birthday, we're going to cancel the study session on the 25th. And Mayor, I would just end on Councilmember Spilsbury raised a very good point of the things that we're recognizing during the month of September. And if you see these teal ribbons around City Hall, I just want to recognize our great employee group, Women Leading Mesa, and they're bringing exposure to its National Ovarian Cancer Month. And so we're just making sure that we help our employees raise awareness so that they can take preventive measures on ovarian cancer. So just wanted to recognize our great employee groups that bring attention to health issues like that.
Great. Thank you, sir. If there's nothing else, Council, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Ms. Spilsbury, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you. Have a great rest of the